On the surface, Madeline Kingsbury's life seems perfect. A devoted mother to her two young children, a rising young professional with a promising career, and an image of stability that many admire. But sometimes, what shines brightest hides deep cracks. Behind her gentle smile and familiar routine, Madeline is battling a silent storm. Fear, exhaustion, and a dangerous stress that comes from the man she once trusted most, the father of her children. On the morning of March 31, 2023, the storm is no longer metaphorical. It rages. Madeline disappears without a trace. Her phone is still on the table. Her wallet is intact. Her plans are unfinished. The most terrifying thing is that she never returned to pick up her child. A seemingly random disappearance quickly spirals out of control into a much darker tale. A tale of hidden secrets, lingering suspicions, and chilling truths. Come with us, as the truth about Madeline's disappearance is not only shocking and haunting, but also touches on the deepest fears of every family. What happened to Madeline in 2023 stunned the nation. But to fully understand the gravity of this tragedy, we need to go back in time, to look at the girl from the beginning, the life she built, the dream she held, and the quiet strength that shaped Madeline Kingsbury. Madeline Kingsbury was born on June 1, 1996, in Minnesota, and was the youngest of three siblings. She always stood out among her peers for her outgoing nature, energy, and curiosity about the world. Growing up in Farmington, she was surrounded by love and support. Even after her parents' divorce and their subsequent remarriages, the warmth of her extended family continued. After graduating high school in 2014, Madeline enrolled at Winona State University to study health sciences. She quickly became known as a bright, dedicated student, respected by her classmates and trusted by professors. By age 26, she had built a stable life with a clear sense of purpose, a reliable career, and big dreams for the future. Her achievements were a testament to her resilience and quiet strength, demonstrating that a person can maintain their inner light even amid hardship. While at university, Madeline met Adam Fravel. Although they never married, they moved in together and started a family, welcoming a daughter and then a son. Initially, their relationship appeared strong, with Adam seemingly supportive of Madeline's ambitions. When their daughter was born, he paused his own work and education to help her complete her studies, which many interpreted as a commitment to their partnership. However, after their second child was born, things began to change. Tensions at home rose, causing Adam to lose his job. This meant that Madeline became the sole financial provider, working full-time as a clinical research coordinator at Mayo Clinic, while pursuing a master's degree at the University of Minnesota. She also took on the primary caregiver role for their 5-year-old daughter and 2-year-old son. Despite the increasing pressure, Madeline managed her responsibilities. Although her family noted that Adam was minimally involved in caring for the children, those close to her observed that every household duty, from childcare to daily tasks, fell solely on her. She often expressed feeling overwhelmed and isolated within her relationship. Adam's relatives acknowledged that he lacked initiative in their partnership and was unwilling to share responsibilities equally. As tensions escalated, Adam's behavior took a concerning turn. He became increasingly controlling, monitoring whom Madeline communicated with, asking to see her messages, and displaying jealousy when she interacted with other men. Over time, his behavior allegedly morphed into psychological manipulation and, as later revealed, physical aggression. These troubling incidents were kept hidden from public view, only known to Madeline's closest friends and family. Her loved ones remarked that she didn't initially understand the severity of her situation and was still hoping to maintain harmony for the sake of her children. Madeline attempted to negotiate a compromise with Adam, but then he crossed a serious boundary. He reportedly threatened her by referencing the high-profile case of Gabby Petito, allegedly saying that if she didn't start doing what he said, she would end up like Gabby. Friends and family who heard this warning urged Madeline to inform the authorities, but she hesitated. She feared that if Adam were arrested, it could emotionally harm their son and daughter. Despite the danger, she believed it was important for her children to maintain a relationship with him. She worried that police intervention might make the situation worse, so she did not report the threat, prioritizing connection with her children over personal safety. Madeline decided to separate from Adam for good. Just before she disappeared, she informed him that she no longer intended to move closer to his parents as they had planned. She realized it was better for the family to stay in Winona, near daycare, her job, and her support network. At that point, her relationship with Adam was effectively over, even though they still shared the same home. Despite the turmoil, Madeline worked to keep things normal and made future plans. She scheduled a meeting with her sister on the 1st of April to drop off her daughter, which was significant to her, and she intended to follow through. Those close to her later noted that when she was unwell or overwhelmed, Adam never helped. He often isolated himself in another room, ignoring their son's cries and the chaos around the house. He demonstrated a lack of interest in addressing their problems, avoided stable employment, and did not commit to unclear career plans. Adam remained in the home, relied on Madeline's income, and acted as if their situation hadn't changed. His indifference seemed deliberate rather than temporary. This growing emotional disconnect was a major factor in Madeline's decision to leave the relationship. Their situation reached a breaking point during this period of silent tension, as what had once seemed like temporary setbacks turned permanent. As their relationship further deteriorated, Adam's behavior became more controlling. His jealousy extended to constant intrusions into Madeline's personal life, as he insisted on seeing her text messages, particularly those involving other men. This became a regular part of their conversations. Although Madeline tried to avoid confrontation, she felt her personal space constricting. Every message and conversation sparked suspicion. Adam demanded that she reveal her private chats, and when she hesitated, he reacted aggressively. Adam's control extended to her online activities, monitoring who she added on social media, what posts she liked, and whom she talked to in messaging apps. He had previously exhibited physical aggression, including an incident when Madeline was on a video call with a friend while holding their son. He suddenly struck her across the face without warning. Her friend witnessed this live and later reported it to the authorities, noting that she had visible bruises and marks. When asked about her situation, Madeline often expressed fear, saying things like that if she left, he might do something terrible to her. Madeline's parents had similar worries. After a call from her seeking help during a conflict, they picked her up along with her children to keep them safe at their home, hoping she wouldn't return to a dangerous situation. However, just 3 days later, Madeline decided to go back, believing it was important for her children to have stability. They were confused by the situation, and she wanted to maintain their sense of normalcy. The pressure of ensuring her safety and her children's made it challenging for her to make a final decision. Despite the advice of friends and family, she hesitated to act. While the situation worsened, Adam's control over her increased, making Madeline feel as though she was being watched even at home. She confided in her sister about how Adam would follow her around, monitoring her conversations and phone use. As the date of her disappearance approached, Madeline lost any illusions about her situation. Her effort to leave the relationship quietly while still allowing her children access to their father ended up complicating things. What started as a careful plan to regain her freedom ultimately led to a tragedy. Before the incident, Madeline had reconnected with Spencer Sullivan, a former college classmate, and their relationship gradually blossomed. Although they weren't living together and kept it discreet, Madeline's close friends knew about it. During the investigation, it emerged that they did not have any formal arrangements. However, Adam's reaction to this development was intense. He forbade Madeline from talking to Spencer when he was around and expressed his anger about their interactions. Madeline felt she needed to keep these changes secret. As Adam perceived any independence as a threat, Madeline was very careful about sharing her plans to move, telling only a very trusted group of people. She even requested that her mother and sister not discuss it openly. Fearing that any slip could reach Adam, Spencer respected her decisions and, after Madeline's disappearance, fully cooperated with law enforcement, providing an alibi that was confirmed and showing no evidence of involvement in the incident. Nevertheless, the fact that he was part of Madeline's life intensified the tension at home, as Adam sensed he was losing control. By early spring 2023, Madeline had reached a pivotal moment. She felt ready to leave her past behind and start anew. While her loved ones were not surprised by her decision to leave Adam, she wanted to keep it private until the timing felt right. Her apprehension about Adam's reaction was not unfounded. She didn't trust him. This is why she kept her plans to leave tightly under wraps until the last moment. Her choice to leave quietly was the result of her prolonged internal battle. She was prepared for a fresh start and was on the verge of making it happen. On Friday morning, March 31, 2023, Madeline went about her daily routine. She dropped the children off at daycare with Adam. Surveillance cameras recorded them arriving at around 8 a.m. Taking the children inside and returning home, Adam said Madeline planned to work a little before heading to the office. He claimed he didn't see her again after that. The last confirmed contact from Madeline was a message to her sister Megan at 8:15 a.m., in which she made a lighthearted comment about a photo they had discussed the night before. After that, there was no further communication. No texts. No returned calls. This silence raised immediate concerns for their mother, Krista Hultgren. She attempted to call Madeline multiple times but received no answer. Growing apprehensive, she contacted Megan to see if she had heard from Madeline. Megan confirmed their brief exchange that morning, but mentioned she hadn't heard anything since. She began texting Madeline too, but received no response. In their family, it was unusual for anyone to go quiet without explanation, as Madeline was usually very attentive to her children and committed to staying in touch. Realizing the situation was serious, Megan knew she had to act quickly. Even though she was in another city and couldn't go to Madeline's house, she called Kate, a close friend of Madeline's who lived nearby, and asked her to check on Madeline. Kate agreed and went over. When she arrived, she saw Madeline's minivan parked in the garage, which worried her. Since the car was there but Madeline wasn't responding, it indicated something was wrong. Kate knocked on the door but received no reply. The lights were off inside, and there were no signs of activity. She tried calling Madeline several times, but there was still no response. This led Kate to quickly realize something was wrong. She contacted the Winona Police Department to request a welfare check. Kate explained Madeline's unavailability throughout the day and mentioned the ongoing tension with Adam. Around 8:20 p.m., an officer arrived at Madeline's home. The officer checked the outside, knocked on the door, and peered through the windows. The minivan remained parked, but nobody answered the door. There were no signs of forced entry or disturbances inside. The officer contacted both Madeline's family and Adam. Her partner, Adam, stated he hadn't seen Madeline since that morning and noted she missed picking up the kids from daycare. He picked them up himself and drove them to his parents' house in Mabel, about an hour away. He didn't seem overly worried and hadn't reported her as missing. Despite the circumstances, the police decided not to file a missing persons report immediately. According to local procedures, they needed to wait 24 hours from the last contact before officially opening a case. This decision left Madeline's family feeling frustrated and confused. They emphasized that her behavior was out of character and that something serious might be wrong. But no exceptions to protocol were made. The first night after Madeline went missing was filled with uncertainty for her family. They had no updates or confirmed clues about her whereabouts. Friends and coworkers were also unaware of her location, and her phone was silent. Attempts to call or track her activity were unsuccessful, leading to the unsettling conclusion that she had not simply stepped away, but had vanished without a trace. Once Madeline was officially reported missing, the police began taking statements, quickly focusing on Adam Fravel. According to his account, on the morning of the 31st of March, After dropping off their children at daycare, he and Madeline returned home. He claimed Madeline stayed home for a work meeting while he began packing to move to his parents' house. He said that he planned to transport some boxes to Mabel and some other boxes to the storage room, and he had taken Madeline's minivan, leaving his car for her. He said he left the house, stopped at a gas station, then returned to load more boxes before heading toward Mabel. During the trip, he realized he had packed boxes meant for storage by mistake. So he turned around and headed back to Winona. He claimed he was on the road from about 10:30 a.m. to noon. When he got home, he stated that his car was still in the driveway, but Madeline was missing, which didn't overly concern him since he assumed she had gone to work. Later, he picked up the kids from daycare and went to his parents' house to spend the day. Investigators began reviewing surveillance footage from the neighborhood, and even at this early stage, inconsistencies in Adam's story emerged. A camera from a nearby house recorded him at 9:44 a.m. walking up to Madeline's minivan and removing its license plate. A few minutes later, he put a different plate on it. By 9:55 a.m., he got into the minivan, and at exactly 10 o'clock a.m., it drove out of the driveway. At 10:02 a.m., the van was captured on camera at a nearby gas station. After that, it was seen at various points along Highway 43 heading south toward Mabel. However, contrary to Adam's claims, no cameras in Mabel recorded the van's arrival. Following a long period with no surveillance sightings, the van reappeared in footage around 1:28 p.m. back in Winona. Returning to the driveway, the gap between 11:59 a.m. and 1:28 p.m. was unexplained, with no cameras capturing the van or Adam during that time. This raised significant concerns that the vehicle had been in a remote location where it could have been concealed. When investigators questioned Adam again, he struggled to explain why he swapped the license plates, why his travel route didn't match the camera footage, or why his phone's GPS didn't show any record of the trip. It was later revealed that the day before Madeline disappeared, Adam had turned off location tracking on all his accounts, including several Gmail addresses, and deactivated the home's security camera system. Even more suspiciously, the surveillance system at his parents' house, where he later took the kids, had been completely wiped. During the search of the house, investigators found that parts of the security system were physically removed, and the memory cards were missing. Adam couldn't clearly explain why this happened right around the time of Madeline's disappearance. He said it was part of preparations for a move, but given the circumstances, this explanation didn't make sense. Detectives suspected he was trying to erase any visual evidence of his actions. Increased concern arose from Adam's behavior after Madeline went missing. He did not participate in search efforts, showed no initiative in gathering information, avoided public statements, and distanced himself from the volunteers. Later, he claimed law enforcement advised him to stay away, a statement that officials later denied. These actions, removing security footage, switching license plates, disabling GPS tracking, painted a concerning picture. By this point in the investigation, it was clear that Adam's behavior did not align with that of a person genuinely worried about the disappearance of the mother of his children. While no charges had been filed yet, the investigation increasingly focused on him. On the 1st of April, 2023, police conducted a second search of the home Adam shared with Madeline. Her belongings were still there, indicative of her not leaving voluntarily. Her coffee cup and plate remained on the kitchen counter. Her jacket, the same one seen in daycare cameras that morning, hung in the hallway. Her phone and purse were still in their usual places. These details indicated that Madeline had not left the house on her own. She would not have gone to work or anywhere else without essential items for communication and work. Staff at the Mayo Clinic, where she was expected to work that day, confirmed she did not show up. Investigators also focused on the garage, discovering that Adam had once again changed the license plates on the minivan the evening before. By the time police arrived, he had reinstalled the original plates. Though surveillance cameras had recorded the earlier switch, This indicated a deliberate effort to conceal movements or delay identification. While the search showed no visible signs of a struggle or blood, forensic teams noted signs of a potential cleanup. In the outside trash bin, they found partially burned fragments of plastic and electronic components. Later analysis suggested these could be remnants of a laptop. Another troubling discovery was a mattress in one of the bedrooms. It had no sheets and displayed stains that were sent for testing. Investigators later searched Adam's parents' home, where they found several discarded electronic devices and remnants of what seemed to be a fire pit. Forensic specialists believed that a laptop casing might have been destroyed in the fire. Nearby was Adam's truck, and in the bed, there was a garden shovel. A neighbor with outdoor cameras provided footage to the police. After Madeline's disappearance, Adam was seen driving that same truck, with the shovel visible in the back. Cadaver detection dogs, trained to recognize human scent, were brought in. Both the shovel and the truck bed triggered alerts from the dogs. Adam's family claimed that his father had used the shovel to bury a deceased animal on the property a few days earlier. However, experts noted that the dogs could differentiate between human and animal scents, and their alerts suggested the presence of human biological traces. Adam was called in for more questioning, and investigators noticed fresh scratches on his face and neck. He explained they were caused by animals or workout equipment, but this did not convince the detectives. A medical evaluation indicated that the scratches looked more like defensive wounds from a physical fight rather than accidents. Each new piece of evidence fueled suspicions against Adam. His behavior didn't align with that of someone genuinely worried about a loved one. He had not reported Madeline missing, did not participate in search efforts, and showed little interest in addressing the evidence against him. Madeline's belongings that were left behind, deleted digital records, attempts to destroy electronic devices, possible cleanup efforts, and suspicious behavior all pointed to a troubling conclusion. The house, which seemed calm and normal from the outside, became the focus of the investigation, revealing more than any words could. On June 7, 2023, the case took a significant turn when a woman's body was found in an old well in a wooded area of rural Houston County. This discovery came from a targeted search effort, which included analyzing the routes Adam took on the day Madeline disappeared. The body was wrapped in a plain white bedsheet and tightly secured with layers of tape. Investigators also discovered pieces of a gray towel and a fabric pillow cover, which were bundled to reduce odor and delay detection. The well's location was carefully selected. However, it was abandoned, difficult to access, and not directly linked to the Adam family, though it was later confirmed that the land had connections to them. After identifying the body through DNA and distinct features, Adam Fravel was arrested without resistance. He faced charges of second-degree intentional homicide with aggravating factors of premeditation and extreme cruelty. Prosecutors presented evidence collected over more than 2 months. Detectives found that the bedsheet in the well matched the linens from the couple's shared bedroom, while the towel and pillowcase matched a set in a hallway closet. Partial fingerprints on the tape matched Adam's. Additionally, microscopic fibers on the fabric matched particles from Madeline's minivan. Investigators suggested the crime was motivated by a need for control. Adam felt he was losing Madeline as she planned to move out and start a new relationship, disrupting the life he was accustomed to. Financial motives also played a role, as Madeline had a life insurance policy that would benefit Adam in the event of her death. Lastly, her leaving would mean shared parenting duties, removing his leverage over her. Experts concluded that Madeline died from asphyxiation, and the absence of struggle at the body location indicated the crime likely happened elsewhere, probably at her home. Psychological experts pointed out that such crimes are often committed by someone close to the victim, typically culminating from ongoing conflict, where violence is used as a last effort to regain control. After Adam Fravel's arrest, he refused to assist law enforcement. During questioning, he avoided direct inquiries, claiming he was tired or confused about the events. He did not confess to any wrongdoing. However, During preliminary hearings, the court concluded there was enough evidence to move forward with a full criminal trial. The judge mandated that he be held in custody without bail. 68 days after Madeline went missing, critical truths began to surface through confirmed information. Initial fears and speculations evolved into concrete evidence, while nothing could bring Madeline back. The investigation achieved its primary goal: uncovering what happened and identifying those responsible. With Adam in custody, the case progressed to the next difficult phase: the legal pursuit of justice. The accusations were based on various types of evidence, including objects found in his house, the connection between the discoveries in the well and his belongings, testimonies from witnesses, analyses from experts, along with a detailed history of his relationship with Madeline. All of these factors combined to form a convincing narrative. During the preliminary hearings, Adam continued to deny any connection to the events. He claimed ignorance about how Madeline's body ended up in the well and maintained that he would never harm her. His defense tried to question the investigation's validity, hinting at possible errors or misunderstandings. But public sentiment largely favored the prosecution. Amid these legal issues, Madeline's family was engaged in a separate personal struggle. They sought custody of Madeline's son and daughter, aiming to protect them from the influence of a father who is now facing serious criminal allegations. On November 7, 2024, a judge in Winona sentenced Adam Fravel, 30, for the murder of Madeline Kingsbury. Madeline's story serves as a powerful reminder of the importance of recognizing and addressing domestic abuse warning signs seriously. In Minnesota and beyond, people mobilized for change, starting foundations and holding demonstrations to prevent similar tragedies from occurring. Toni was the only girl in a family with two brothers. Growing up as the only daughter, she embraced her tomboy side while also embodying the charm of a traditional Southern belle. Being raised in a household of boys made her independent and assertive, allowing her to thrive in male-dominated settings while still exuding femininity and grace. After graduating from high school, Toni decided to further her education by attending college and medical school. She was a dedicated student who excelled, ultimately graduating at the top of her class. Throughout her life, Toni was determined to succeed as an ophthalmologist, becoming a respected doctor. Despite her professional accomplishments, she longed for love and companionship. Although she married young, she quickly realized that the relationship lacked chemistry and compatibility. The divorce was a challenging time for Toni. Eventually, she used her career to help cope with the pain, but over time, she recognized that it was time to open her heart to love once again. At 30, Toni decided to start dating again, but her past experiences made her cautious and reserved. Although she was initially hesitant, she gradually began to open herself up to the idea of love. She met new people and explored possible relationships, but letting go of her past and accepting the idea of true love proved challenging. Like many others, Toni thought online dating could help her find her soulmate. With strong faith being central to her life, she chose to join a Christian dating site in search of a partner who shared her beliefs. During her online dating experience, Toni went on several dates with interesting men, yet she struggled to find someone with whom she genuinely connected on a deeper level. Despite the ups and downs, Toni remained optimistic that she would eventually meet the love of her life. Just when she felt like giving up, she came across Harold Henthorn, a charming and attractive man who captured her interest. His dating profile portrayed him as a confident and successful individual living in Colorado. What stood out to Toni was Harold's sincere desire to find love again after experiencing loss. He revealed that he was a widower, having lost his first wife, Sandra Lynn Henthorn, in a car accident, that he had patiently waited a long time for a second chance at happiness. As Harold and Toni continued their online conversations, Harold decided to visit Mississippi to meet Toni in person. When he met Toni's friends, he easily charmed them with his warm and engaging personality. They quickly recognized that Harold and Tony were a perfect match. His lively nature balanced Tony's more reserved demeanor. From their first meeting, Tony felt a deep connection with Harold, sensing he was her soulmate. Their relationship developed rapidly. By Valentine's Day 2000, Harold proposed to Tony with a beautiful ring. Overjoyed, Tony accepted, excited to start this new chapter with her Prince Charming. Less than a year after they met, on September 30th, 2000, Tony and Harold got married in a beautiful church ceremony in Mississippi. After the wedding, they moved to Colorado, where Harold lived. Tony quickly became a skilled doctor, treating her patients with the care and attention of family. Her exceptional bedside manner ensured that every patient felt heard, understood, and cared for, reflecting her compassion and commitment to her profession. Tony's life centered on her career as a doctor and her relationship with Harold. Together, they created a warm home, supported one another. As the years went by, they welcomed a daughter, Haley, who brought immense joy to their lives. Time passed, and Tony Henthorne and her husband Harold continued to build a fulfilling life together. Just 2 weeks before their anniversary, Harold contacted the office manager at Tony's ophthalmology practice. Eager to assist, the manager listened as Harold shared his plan for a surprise. He wanted to take Tony to Rocky Mountain National Park to celebrate their 12th wedding anniversary. Understanding how passionate Tony was about her job and her patients, the office manager ensured that Tony's schedule remained open. On September 28, 2012, Harold visited Tony's office. The office manager led Tony into an exam room, expecting her to see a routine patient. To her surprise, she found her husband Harold waiting for her. Harold had a surprise. They were going on a weekend getaway. He reassured Tony that he had arranged for a babysitter for their young daughter, Haley, and had already packed her bag. Tony happily agreed to the unexpected trip. As they began their trip, Harold let Tony know that their first night would be spent at the Stanley Hotel in Estes Park, Colorado, which inspired Stephen King's novel, The Shining. When they arrived at the hotel, they enjoyed an early dinner before heading to their room. Harold had carefully planned trails for them to explore the next day. On September 29, 2012, they set out to hike in the beautiful Rocky Mountain National Park. Their day started off peacefully, filled with excitement about the stunning views and the promise of a wonderful day outdoors. While America's national parks are celebrated for their breathtaking scenery, they also come with hidden dangers. A study by Backpacker magazine reveals that, on average, 243 people die in national parks each year, underscoring the risks involved in wilderness exploration. In Rocky Mountain National Park, falling was the leading cause of death. As time went on, Harold and Tony moved further into the Rocky area. Just before 5:54 p.m., Harold made a distressing call to 911, sounding panicked as he told the dispatcher that Tony had fallen off a cliff and was in critical condition. The dispatcher quickly sent a park ranger, who was also a trained EMT, to help. However, the ranger had to walk through difficult terrain to reach Harold. While on the phone, Harold urgently pleaded for a helicopter to rescue Tony, but the dispatcher explained that a helicopter couldn't reach them because of the high altitude and challenging terrain. Although the dispatcher tried to reassure Harold that help was on the way, he could sense Harold's fear and desperation. After a while, Harold ended the call because he was worried his cell phone battery might die, leaving him unable to call for help. As the ranger searched the park, the sun began to set, creating a creepy atmosphere. To help the ranger find him, Harold decided to start a fire. About an hour after his first call, Harold reached out to emergency services again. This time, the dispatcher tried to guide him through CPR to save Tony's life, but Harold insisted on hanging up, saying he needed to keep the line open. While the ranger continued looking, the dispatcher called Harold again and asked him to use his whistle to help the ranger locate him. Harold blew the whistle to signal that he was nearby. Unfortunately, by the time the ranger and emergency services arrived, more than 2 hours after Harold reported Tony's fall, it was too late and Tony had already died. All deaths in national parks are carefully investigated, and this case was no different. Harold told the ranger about the hike that led to Tony's tragic death. He mentioned that at 1:45 p.m., He and Tony started their hike on the Deer Mountain Trail and stopped to take a selfie. The trail was crowded with many hikers, so they moved deeper into the woods. Harold said they reached their destination around 3:30 p.m. and had lunch on the mountain. He took a photo of Tony during this time. However, the area where they had lunch was too noisy for them to enjoy their meal, so they decided to head further down the mountain to find a quieter spot. Harold shared that Tony had seen wild turkeys and wanted to get closer to photograph them. Unfortunately, she fell 128 feet down the mountain while trying to take pictures. After Tony's tragic death, Harold returned home to a wave of support from family and friends. His daughter, Haley, was profoundly affected by her mother's passing. She also received a lot of love and support from those around her. However, amid the sympathy, rumors began to spread about the nature of Tony's sudden death. Tony's friends found it strange that she had died only a year after nearly losing her life in a previous accident. A year before, while cleaning under the deck, Harold had accidentally struck a loose beam, causing it to fall on Tony's head. She was rushed to the hospital but luckily survived, despite suffering bruises and injuries that took time to heal. Given this history, Tony's friends began to wonder if there was something suspicious about her death. They questioned whether the earlier accident was genuinely accidental or if there was more to the story. On the day of the funeral, people grew suspicious when Harold seemed more focused on watching a football game than grieving for his wife among family and friends. The FBI began investigating Tony's death. Agents interviewed the ranger who first arrived at the scene the day Tony died. The ranger reported that there was no evidence Harold tried to perform CPR on his wife. Further investigation revealed more concerning details, including that Harold's cell phone sent signals from the area where Tony fell 9 times. These signals led investigators to suspect that Harold might have scouted the location with the intention of killing his wife. The FBI received a call indicating that Tony was not the first wife of Harold. This discovery raised concerns about Harold's potential involvement in the death of his previous wife. Lynn and Harold were married in September 1982 and lived in Colorado. On May 6, 1995, shortly after 9 p.m., a woman and her family were driving on Highway 67 in rural Colorado when they noticed a man in the street signaling for help. It was Harold Henthorn. He appeared anxious and quickly approached their vehicle, asking for assistance. Harold explained that his wife, Lynn, was trapped under their car. He claimed that while they were fixing a flat tire, the jack had collapsed, pinning Lynn underneath the vehicle. The woman and her family quickly jumped in to help lift the car off Lynn. As they worked, they saw that her lips were blue and she wasn't breathing. It was a frightening sight, especially in the cold weather. Lynn was only wearing a tank top and jeans, leaving her vulnerable, in need of warmth. Recognizing how serious the situation was, the woman and her family immediately took action. They placed their coats over Lynn to help keep her warm. Since it was the mid-1990s, there were no cell phones nearby. After driving 2 miles, the woman who assisted Harold found a house with a phone. She quickly called emergency services to report the urgent situation. The dispatcher confirmed that help was on the way, but emphasized that time was critical. When the police officers and paramedics arrived, they gave Lynn a shot of epinephrine to restart her heart. Fortunately, this worked, and her heart began beating again. She was then taken to a nearby hospital for more treatment. Sadly, despite this initial improvement, Lynn passed away at the age of 37. While Lynn was receiving treatment, one of the EMTs attempted to gather information from Harold. However, Harold was uncooperative and kept distancing himself from the medic, making it hard to obtain the necessary details. The medic found Harold's behavior strange. He did not seem anxious or concerned about his wife's condition. From these observations, the medic concluded that Harold did not appear to care genuinely for Lynn's well-being, which raised doubts about his intentions. When medics successfully restarted Lynn's heart, Harold appeared shocked, possibly even disappointed. Despite the freezing weather, he didn't take off his jacket to cover his injured wife, which puzzled the medics who expected him to care for her comfort. Meanwhile, bystanders seemed more focused on helping Lynn than supporting her husband, adding to the medics' confusion. An autopsy revealed that Lynn died from asphyxiation. This finding led to an investigation into her sudden death. However, a few days later, the medical examiner determined that her death was accidental and closed the case. At that moment, no one suspected that Lynn's death was anything but straightforward. The case was considered resolved, and there were no signs of foul play. Detectives investigating Tony's death in 2012 hired a private investigator to look into Lynn's death, which had occurred several years earlier. The investigator found that Harold had given inconsistent accounts regarding how Lynn ended up trapped under the car. In some instances, Harold claimed Lynn was looking for a lug nut when the accident happened, while in others, he said she was trying to retrieve a flashlight she had accidentally dropped. Harold also changed his story about their plans at the time of the incident. Sometimes he said they were about to go out for dinner, and other times he claimed they had already eaten and were heading home. Investigators stated that they found some inconsistencies in Harold's story and decided to examine his relationship with Tony more closely. A family nanny, Schott, reported that Tony and Harold slept in separate rooms and that Harold occasionally traveled for work. He would go on these trips, but he didn't bring any luggage, and then he just showed up the next day, Schott said. She wondered if Harold was having an affair. He seemed to have a secret life. They also encountered difficulties in finding concrete evidence of his fundraising activities, which were not available online. Local authorities and journalists also received 17 anonymous letters highlighting the fact that Harold's first wife, Lynn, was crushed under their car while he was changing a tire on the side of the road, according to Harold. Authorities ruled it an accident, but when Tony also died, family, friends, and investigators noticed striking similarities. They mentioned that he had also taken out insurance on his wife and found that he had received $600,000 after Lynn died. Investigators noted that Harold had taken out three $1.5 million insurance policies on Tony during their 12 years together. After Tony's death, their daughter Haley stated that Harold tried to control her reactions after informing her of what had happened. According to Haley, this controlling behavior continued at home. She mentioned that she had to ask for his permission before she could have a snack or play with a toy. At a bail hearing the following week, a judge denied Harold bail, declaring him a substantial flight risk because he still had access to a large sum of money, including Tony's assets. While Harold was in prison, Haley was adopted by her mother's brother, Barry, and his wife, Paula. Harold insisted that he frequently traveled for work, but further investigation revealed that these claims were false. The agents found no tax returns, pay stubs, or any evidence showing that Harold had been employed since 1995. This discovery raised doubts about Harold's reliability and increased suspicion regarding his activities. On November 6, 2014, 2 years after Tony's death in Rocky Mountain National Park, Harold was arrested and charged with murder. He pleaded not guilty. Meanwhile, Tony's family wanted to take custody of Haley, Tony's daughter, but Harold, who was in jail, denied their request. 10 months after Harold was arrested, he went on trial in 2015 for the murder of his second wife, Tony. Although there was no forensic evidence linking him to her death, the prosecution presented several pieces of evidence to build their case. First, they highlighted that Harold had taken out multiple life insurance policies on Tony, suggesting that he had planned to kill her for financial gain. They also provided evidence of cell phone activity in the area weeks before Tony's death, indicating that Harold was searching for a discrete location to carry out his scheme. Additionally, the prosecution showed a map found in Harold's car, marked with a large X at the location where Tony fell from the cliff. They argued that this map demonstrated Harold's intention to use this spot to execute his plan. The prosecution's strongest evidence focused on the circumstances surrounding the death of Harold's first wife, Lynn, which raised suspicions. The striking similarities between Lynn's death and that of his second wife, Tony, led the jury to believe that Harold had a pattern of behavior indicating his guilt. After a 10-day trial, the jury deliberated and found Harold Henthorn guilty of murdering Tony Henthorn, concluding that the similarities between the two cases pointed to his responsibility. Consequently, Harold was sentenced to life in prison, where he will remain for the rest of his life. Although he was never charged with Lynn's murder, many believe he is also culpable for her death. In December 2015, custody of Haley, the daughter of Tony and Harold, was granted to Tony's oldest brother. In 2023, Harold Henthorne attempted to appeal his conviction, but the appeal was dismissed. He also filed for post-conviction relief, claiming ineffective assistance from his defense attorney. Harold contended that his attorney failed to meet constitutional standards and was not adequately prepared for the trial. However, the court rejected his request for relief, determining that his attorney had provided a sufficient defense consistent with constitutional requirements for a fair trial. Harold Henthorne's unsettling story serves as a powerful warning about the risks posed by people who seem charming. His talent for charming and deceiving others underscores the need to be cautious and skeptical when dating or forming relationships. This case is a cautionary tale for anyone in similar situations, urging them to be careful and reach out to trustworthy people for support. Mike Reischl married his first wife, Dee Dee Hoffman, in 1979 while they were students at the University of Florida in Gainesville. Mike seemed to have it all. From an early age, Mike showed outstanding qualities. He was a dedicated Boy Scout, nearing the rank of Eagle Scout, and an altar boy, reflecting strong moral values. At the University of Florida, he joined a fraternity, developing athletic skills and excelling in academics. He later earned a Master of Business Administration from the University of Miami, paving the way for professional success. Dee Dee, his wife, noted that Mike was a supportive husband who never physically abused her. However, their relationship had reached a breaking point. They had two daughters, Caroline and Kate, whom Mike loved deeply. Despite his accomplishments, he spent long hours traveling for work, causing his daughters to become accustomed to his absence during their early years. After 25 years of marriage, Dee Dee informed Mike that she wanted a divorce. She then moved out of their home to provide their daughters, Caroline and Kate, a familiar place to return to during their college breaks. At 49, Mike found himself single for the first time in many years and wanted to find love again. In the mid-2000s, as internet dating became popular, he created a profile on Match and soon connected with Susan O'Brien Reischl, a 38-year-old Hispanic nurse. As their relationship developed, Mike and Susan enjoyed great dates and trips together. Shortly after they met, Susan moved into Mike's home, taking over the space that had been Dee Dee's. When Caroline first met Susan, she was worried about her father's new girlfriend. Caroline was surprised by how much Susan drank at their first meeting. Despite having several martinis, Susan was able to walk and talk normally. This behavior was unusual for Caroline, raising concerns in her mind. In 2007, despite Caroline's concerns, Mike and Susan got married. This marked a significant change in their lives, as Susan stopped working and Mike stopped traveling for his job. Instead, he bought a local business called Ocala Dental Care, which became central to their daily lives. To outsiders, Mike and Susan seemed like the perfect couple. They lived in an affluent neighborhood in Alachua County, Florida, known as Hiley Plantation, and often joked about their seemingly ideal life together. However, underneath this facade, they were facing serious challenges in their marriage. In the summer of 2007, Mike proposed a prenuptial agreement to Susan, which surprised their friends and family. They had always been seen as a strong and united couple. What led Mike to suggest a prenup? The turning point was an incident at one of his daughter's parties. Susan, who had a fiery personality, used foul language in front of Mike's daughter, leading to an intense argument. This incident prompted Mike to think about protecting his assets in case their marriage ended in divorce. Mike and Susan seemed financially secure, but there were hidden problems. Susan revealed to Mike that she had $35,000 in credit card debt, which worried him greatly. One significant issue in their relationship was Susan's negative feelings toward Mike's daughters. Caroline mentioned that the only time she could talk to her father was when he was alone in his car. Susan's dislike for his daughters created a barrier, preventing Caroline from having meaningful discussions with her father. Even though Mike and Susan encountered challenges, their relationship appeared to improve, at least outwardly. In 2016, when Caroline announced her engagement, Susan became very involved and wanted to play a major role in planning the wedding. She insisted on hosting a bridal shower for Caroline, even though this is usually a responsibility of the bride's mother or sister. While organizing the shower, Susan intentionally left out Caroline's mother's friends from the guest list but made sure to invite her own family and friends. Although it was somewhat unusual for Susan to be so heavily involved, Caroline ultimately found the shower enjoyable, appreciating the effort Susan put in to make it fun and memorable. When Caroline was choosing her wedding dress, Susan went with her to the bridal boutique. They looked at various dresses together until Caroline found one she loved. Susan even used her credit card to pay for the $1,000 gown. In November 2017, Caroline married at Oheka Castle in Long Island, with 160 guests in attendance. The wedding was opulent and had the grandeur fit for royalty. Before Mike walked his daughter Caroline down the aisle, she noticed a strange mark on his face. When Caroline asked him about it, Mike dismissed her concerns, wanting to avoid upsetting her on such an important day. 3 weeks after the wedding, Mike revealed to Caroline that the mark had become a long white scar, which was the result of physical abuse by his wife, Susan. He shared that Susan had been arrested for domestic battery after she became violent while drunk. Susan, on the other hand, described the incident differently. She claimed that after Caroline's wedding, Mike told her that the event had gone $150,000 over budget, which made her very angry. This led to a heated argument between them. During the confrontation, Susan threw her phone at Mike and pushed him in an attempt to calm things down. Ironically, it was Susan who called 911 to report the situation. She said she intended to leave for their beach condo to help defuse things, but she took too long to depart. Consequently, when she hadn't left the house, the police arrested her. The court later mandated that Susan stay away from Mike, and she sought help for Susan's counseling, and anger management. After some time, Mike chose not to file charges against Susan, leading to the case being dropped. Susan moved out of their home and into a condo in Ponte Vedra. While this gave her a break from the couple's ongoing conflicts, it was temporary. On February 3, 2018, at 3:30 a.m., Mike Reischel made a disturbing call to 911 from his home in Gainesville, Florida. He told the dispatcher that someone had entered his house and that his wife, Susan, was bleeding heavily. When the police arrived, they found Susan seriously injured on the bed in the master bedroom. Medics were called immediately, and they rushed her to the nearest hospital. As she was taken into surgery, doctors worked hard to save her life. She was in critical condition, and her chances of survival were slim. Meanwhile, a detective arrived at Mike's home, which had been secured as a crime scene. He began investigating, carefully looking for any clues. What he discovered was alarming. In the master bedroom, there was a large amount of blood on the bed and a bloody bent knife, but no signs of forced entry through doors or windows. To understand what happened, the detective reviewed security camera footage from Mike's house. However, after examining the footage, he found no one leaving the house. Susan miraculously survived the attack but suffered serious injuries to her wrist, stomach, and neck. Once she regained consciousness in the hospital, she shared a startling account with the detectives investigating the case. Susan revealed that there had been no intruder. Instead, it was Mike who had attacked her. She claimed Mike had fabricated a story about someone breaking into their home and assaulting them. Susan explained that they had begun arguing during dinner at a local restaurant and decided to return home in separate cars. When she arrived home, she went straight to bed. As she was falling asleep, she suddenly felt a sharp stabbing pain. When she opened her eyes, she found Mike standing over her, holding a knife. Overcome with panic, she shouted, "Michael, you are going to kill me." To her horror, Mike responded, "That's exactly what I want to do." Susan's cries for help went ignored as Mike continued to stab her, leaving her in extreme pain and covered in blood. For an hour, she lay in bed, bleeding heavily and terrified for her life. Mike told her that he wouldn't kill her if she agreed to claim that an intruder had broken into their home and attacked her. Desperate to survive, Susan reluctantly went along with his story. He then changed his clothes and called 911, pretending that a robbery had happened. Mike Reischel was arrested for the attempted murder of his wife, Susan. The news shocked many, including his ex-wife, Dee Dee, and his daughters. Dee Dee, who had divorced Mike years ago, found it hard to believe the allegations. She had never seen any signs of violence during their marriage and couldn't wrap her head around the accusation against her former husband. Similarly, Caroline and Kate were stunned by their father's arrest. They had always viewed Mike as a kind and generous man. The idea that he could hurt their stepmother was unimaginable. As events progressed, Mike faced more charges alongside the attempted murder charge. He was indicted for false imprisonment, obstruction, and tampering with evidence. These new charges made the situation more complex and serious. Because of Mike's wealth, the judge set a bond of $2.5 million for these additional charges, but no bond was allowed for the attempted murder charge due to its severe nature. Mike's arrest shocked the community. Many who knew him and his family struggled to reconcile their views of him with the serious charges he was facing. In June 2018, while awaiting trial in jail for the attempted murder of Susan O'Brien Reischel, Michael Reischel was accused of hiring a hitman to kill his wife. According to sources, Reischel contacted Roderick Jermaine McCullum, a 33-year-old inmate, to plot Susan's murder for $100,000, providing details about Susan's home and a floor plan. McCullum was also charged with conspiracy, but the case was sealed due to the ongoing investigation. Eventually, the charges were dismissed, and Mike's daughter Caroline called the idea so absurd it was laughable. It is important to note that in November 2017, Susan was arrested for domestic violence after throwing a phone and punching Mike in the arm during an argument over Caroline's wedding expenses. Mike reported to the police that Susan had a drinking problem and had repeatedly abused him, which led to a restraining order. Susan denies the charges of violence, and the case was dropped when Mike chose not to pursue Susan's prosecution. The 2019 trial shed light on the troubled relationship between Mike and Susan. During the proceedings, Mike described their marriage as strained and tumultuous. He explained that they rarely had visitors at their home, mainly because Susan was opposed to Mike inviting his friends from his former university's advisory board. Another source of conflict was Mike's involvement in charitable activities. He stated that while he enjoyed making donations, this sometimes led to disagreements with Susan. Mike mentioned that she would frequently threaten to divorce him if he attended committee meetings, country club events, or made donations without her approval. Mike expressed that he struggled with conflicts regarding charitable contributions, while Susan's spending habits appeared to go unchecked. He stated that Susan frequently bought clothing and jewelry without discussing it with him. This difference in how they managed their finances contributed to the stress in their marriage, leaving Mike feeling frustrated and overwhelmed by their ongoing financial difficulties. Additionally, he testified that Susan sometimes resorted to violence to resolve disputes. For instance, in July 2016, he claimed that Susan threw a wine bottle at him from the top of the stairs, hitting his shoulders. This was not an isolated incident. He mentioned other times when she threw vases and heavy mugs at him. He did take pictures of his injuries and shared them with his daughter, Caroline. Mike consistently insisted during the trial that, despite experiencing abuse, he loved his wife and wished to stay married to her. However, he felt he had to tread carefully around her, always worried about her reactions. On February 3, 2018, Mike invited Susan to dinner, hoping they could improve their relationship. He chose their favorite steakhouse, believing a change of environment and a romantic setting might help. Unfortunately, during dinner, Mike received a text from his daughter, Caroline, which upset Susan. The atmosphere turned awkward and tense, and Susan's anger grew, prompting her to leave the restaurant in an Uber. After the meal, Mike followed her in his car. On their way home, Susan texted Mike, implying she thought Caroline would sabotage any future relationship he had. When Susan and Mike returned home that night, they communicated through text messages rather than speaking. Susan let Mike know that she was going to file for divorce and would be leaving the next morning. At around 10:13 p.m., she sent him one last message about his serious as Susan's with boundaries regarding his daughter. While Susan was alone in the guest room, Mike unexpectedly entered and attacked her. She felt pressure in her upper abdomen and noticed a knife in his hand. Susan claimed that Mike insisted they were not getting a divorce and described a violent struggle during which he sliced her left thumb. She stated that he stabbed her multiple times and slashed at her wrists, leaving her with serious injuries. She testified about losing a significant amount of blood, which caused her to vomit and lose control of her muscles and bodily functions. Mike reportedly told her that he would stay with her until she died. However, Mike provided a different account of the events. He said that he entered the bedroom and saw Susan on the bed with a knife. A fight broke out over the knife, which resulted in Susan being fatally stabbed in the stomach as they fell onto the bed. Mike, however, did not clarify how Susan also sustained stab wounds to her neck and thumb during the incident. In his testimony, Mike said he meant to call 911 for help after accidentally injuring Susan in the struggle. However, Susan reportedly asked him not to make the call because she was afraid of being arrested again for domestic violence. According to Mike, they lay together as she bled for several hours. The prosecution argues that if Mike's account is accurate, he and Susan were in a blood-soaked bedroom filled with vomit and human waste. Mike reported that at 3 a.m., their dog entered the messy bedroom, which led him to get out of bed to attend to the dog. During this time, Susan took a knife and harmed her wrists, allegedly saying she was afraid of going to jail. Mike asserted that he reassured Susan he wouldn't get her arrested and instead chose to lie to the police, claiming he would protect her. They then agreed on a fake robbery to call the emergency services. As part of his plan, Mike disabled the security cameras to make it look like a break-in occurred at around 2:42 a.m. At 3:30 a.m. on February 3rd, he called 911 and turned the cameras back on. The prosecution argued that Mike's actions showed he intended to harm Susan. They claimed that his willingness to lie about what happened and manipulate the surveillance footage indicated he was trying to hide his involvement in the crime. In contrast, the defense argued that Mike acted out of a desire to protect his wife. They asserted that Susan's attempted suicide stemmed from her mental health as Susan's and that Mike was trying to save her when he turned off the camera and lied to the police. A bloodstain pattern analyst testified in Mike's defense, stating that he reviewed medical records supporting Mike's account. The analyst explained that if Susan had cut her wrist around 10 p.m., as she said, she would have died from blood loss. However, if Mike's version of events was accurate, it was more plausible that she survived the incident since medical help arrived shortly afterward. The prosecution dismissed Mike's claims about wanting to reconcile with his wife. They presented evidence showing that Mike had visited 3 dating websites, suggesting he was not serious about mending their relationship. In response, Mike's defense pointed out that he had also looked at websites aimed at helping battered husbands. After a 9-day trial, the jury deliberated for 4 hours before returning with a guilty verdict for Mike Reischel on attempted first-degree murder and other charges. In December 2019, he was sentenced, but Susan chose not to attend the hearing. Mike's daughter, Caroline, spoke in court, expressing her pride in being his daughter. She shared how compassionate and selfless Mike had been throughout the years, always prioritizing others. Several of Mike's friends also spoke up, describing him as kind, gentle, and a true gentleman. Although the prosecution sought a 50-year sentence, the judge decided to impose a 30-year sentence on Mike. Considering Mike's age at the time of sentencing, it's probable that he will spend the rest of his life in prison. Just after 11 p.m., everything changed. In a small New York City apartment, a loud crashing sound interrupted the quiet. What followed was chaotic and frightening, with neighbors hearing shouting, banging, and objects falling. Then, abruptly, there was silence. Inside the apartment, a young woman found herself in a nightmare she had long dreaded. An ex-lover had returned, and this time he was determined to cause trouble. In 2015, Elena Hardy, nursing student at Hunter College, moved to New York City. Her charming personality made her popular. She quickly made friends in the city. As she focused on her studies and enjoyed the lively atmosphere around her, her promising journey took a troubling turn when she met Fernando Munera. What started as an exciting romance soon turned dangerous. While friends and neighbors often saw them happily walking their dog or riding his motorcycle together, beneath their smiles lay a relationship marked by instability. As time went on, Fernando's behavior became more unpredictable and aggressive. By early 2021, less than a year into their relationship, things escalated to violence. In a terrifying incident, he restrained Elena in her apartment, damaged her possessions, and took her phone to stop her from calling for help. This led to his arrest, where he faced charges of harassment, unlawful imprisonment, and criminal mischief. A restraining order was issued, preventing him from contacting Elena, but he ignored it. Afterward, he began a pattern of constant harassment, bombarding her with calls, dozens in just one weekend. He criticized her appearance and attempted to control how she dressed, even when she was away from home. His obsession grew stronger, and he became increasingly possessive, unable to accept her independence. Neighbors became concerned, noticing his erratic behavior as he muttered to himself and angrily paced in front of the building. On May 19, 2021, tensions escalated dramatically. That evening, Fernando was seen outside, filled with anger, his fists clenched and pacing anxiously. Earlier that day, he had argued with Elena, who refused to let him enter her apartment. He disappeared for several hours, leading many to believe that the situation had calmed down. However, Fernando was actually planning something horrific. Later that night, around 8:45 p.m., chaos erupted. Fernando quickly returned to the building with a knife and a handgun, climbed the fire escape to Hardy's fourth-floor apartment, and broke in through an open window. Inside, Elena barely had time to react. Startled by the sudden crash, she found herself face to face with her ex before she could think or scream. There was nowhere to escape. Within moments, the small apartment turned into a scene of violence. Fernando, consumed by rage, acted on his obsession. He stabbed Elena 7 times, causing cuts and bites, targeting her upper body with calculated brutality. The apartment was filled with the sounds of struggle, Elena's desperate cries, and the chaos that ensued. The room was in disarray, with overturned furniture, blood splattered on the walls and pooling on the floor. She shouted for help, but no one came. Neighbors heard everything, the thuds, the screams, the crashes, but fear kept them paralyzed. Behind closed doors, they listened to the violence unfold just feet away, unaware of the full extent of the horror. Fernando didn't stop his assault. He brandished an air pistol, not as a deadly weapon but as a means to instill fear, showing Elena that even in her last moments, he was in control. His aim was not just to inflict pain but to completely dominate her. She had tried to escape him and take back her life. Elena fought off her attacker, stabbing him in the chest and neck. Fernando followed Elena out of the apartment as she collapsed on the floor. He was covered in blood and had a knife in his hand. Neighbors heard her screams and called the police. She died minutes later in an ambulance on the way to the hospital. Fernando was taken to Harlem Hospital in critical condition and later charged with murder, burglary, and criminal mischief. Investigators looked into his history, uncovered alarming patterns of control, violent outbursts, previous incidents of harassment and assault. Court records showed that Fernando had consistently exhibited volatile behavior. Elena's death was not his first act of violence, it was the latest in a series of warning signs. The restraining order she obtained, which should have provided her some safety, ultimately failed her. Elena's family was devastated. Her mother struggled to accept that her daughter, a vibrant, funny, and kind-hearted individual who had tried desperately to escape her circumstances, was gone. The weight of grief was compounded by the realization that Elena had taken all the right steps. She sought help, established boundaries, and pursued legal action. Yet, none of these efforts were sufficient. As the news of the murder spread, people in New York took to the streets. Women marched to honor Elena, and vigils were organized in her memory. Her story sparked widespread outrage, resonating with countless women who have faced abuse. Elena's death became a poignant symbol, highlighting the failures of the system to protect those who need it the most. Hardy's family has set up a GoFundMe page to help pay for her funeral and transportation back to Arizona, and has already raised more than $10,000. After health has stabilized, at the precinct, Fernando Munera remained silent. He stared straight ahead, refusing to cooperate or provide any explanation or remorse. The detectives had no confession to rely on, just a troubling puzzle filled with obsessive behavior, digital clues, and broken lives. As the investigation progressed, a disturbing picture emerged. Fernando did not view Elena as a partner, he saw her as an object to own. When she tried to establish her independence, when she stood up for herself, he perceived it as a betrayal. In the months before the trial, the evidence against Fernando accumulated. Witnesses reported his strange behavior leading up to the murder. He was seen pacing, mumbling, and watching Elena's apartment. Surveillance cameras captured his movements in detail, showing his journey from the streets to the fire escape to Elena's fourth-floor apartment and crawled through an open window. Forensic evidence, including fingerprints, DNA, and injuries on Elena's body, provided further confirmation. There were no other suspects or uncertainties. The trial focused not on who committed the crime but on whether justice would be served. The courtroom was crowded on the first day of Fernando's trial, with every seat occupied. The atmosphere was heavy with emotions. Elena's family sat at the front, fixed on Fernando, who was responsible for their loss. The prosecution began by outlining a disturbing timeline, illustrating how Fernando had descended into possessive rage. They portrayed him as calculated and deliberate, emphasizing that this was not a spur-of-the-moment act but a planned attack. They presented footage of Fernando lingering outside Elena's building, his body tense and his expression filled with anger. They described how he had initially left but returned armed with both a knife and an air pistol, two weapons, signifying two conscious choices. There was no uncertainty, only a progression toward violence. Then came the photographs from the crime scene left everyone in the room speechless, walls stained with blood, furniture in disarray, and a life taken too soon. A forensic pathologist told the jury about the stab wounds on Elena's upper body. These wounds were not random or chaotic, they were deliberate and targeted. A neighbor recounted the sounds heard on the night of the murder, the crashing noise, faint screams, and then complete silence. Another neighbor mentioned seeing Fernando outside earlier that evening, pacing anxiously with clenched fists, talking to himself with a look in his eyes that suggested something dangerous was brewing. Elena's friends shared her final thoughts from the last days of her life. She had been terrified. She confided in them about the threatening phone calls, the pressure to change her appearance, and her constant fear. One friend read a message Elena had sent. Elena said that she was scared of what Fernando might do, but she didn't know how to make him stop. This statement hit hard, and the room went quiet. The defense presented a different narrative. They acknowledged the attack and the victim's death but portrayed Fernando as a man who had lost control due to an overwhelming relationship. They argued that he had reacted impulsively after being locked out, claiming it was not a premeditated act but rather an emotional breakdown. They referenced his history of mental health issues, suggesting that his behavior stemmed from an undiagnosed condition. A psychologist testified about themes of trauma, instability, and mental decline. In contrast, the prosecution remained firm and clear. They asserted that Fernando did not simply lose control, he planned the attack. He paced back and forth, returned armed, broke in, and used two weapons to stab an unarmed woman 7 times before fleeing. This wasn't an emotional spiral, it was deliberate and calculated violence. His obsession was unrestrained, leading to a tragic outcome fueled by hatred, not a lapse in judgment. Fernando had made his choice long before that night, and Elena Hardy lost her life because of it. As the trial went on, the courtroom became a tense battleground where two contrasting images of Fernando Munera clashed. The defense depicted him as a broken man, filled with remorse and overwhelmed by circumstances. In stark contrast, the prosecution painted a much darker picture. In her final moments, Elena Hardy experienced terror, helplessness, and pain at the hands of a man who viewed her independence as defiance and wanted to control or destroy her. Elena's family attended every day of the trial. Her mother held a framed photo of her daughter, a symbol of a life once filled with joy and hope. Tears streamed down her face whenever the prosecution recounted the brutal details of the crime. Yet amidst the sorrow, there was determination. Elena's mother was resolute in her promise that Fernando would face justice for his actions. In their closing arguments, the prosecution emphasized their message clearly. They urged the jury to view Fernando not as a victim, but as a calculated aggressor. This was not a tragic error, it was a display of brutal violence. Elena was not his partner, she became his target the moment she tried to take back control of her life. The defense made one final attempt to restore Fernando's reputation. They highlighted his remorse, his troubled history, letters from friends who depicted him as kind and caring. However, these sentiments could not erase the stark reality, the evidence, including the images, witness testimonies, stab wounds, and months of increasing harassment, remained undeniable. The jury deliberated for hours. When the verdict of guilty for second-degree murder was read, the atmosphere changed dramatically. A mix of relief, sorrow, and a sense of finality filled the room. Elena's family embraced each other tightly. While this did not bring closure, since nothing could bring her back, it was a meaningful step towards justice. A month later, the courtroom convened again for the sentencing. Elena's mother stood to deliver her victim impact statement. Her hands trembled, her voice conveyed the deep sorrow of a life irrevocably changed. She talked about the void Elena left behind and the silence that now filled her home, contrasting with the joy of her daughter's laughter. The prosecution reiterated their case, this time emphasizing the consequences. They requested the maximum sentence, highlighting the deliberate nature of the crime, how Fernando had disregarded the restraining order, how the cycle of violence had escalated, and how society must seriously recognize the tragic loss of a young woman's life. The defense offered their remaining arguments, attempting to appeal to the jury's compassion. Then Fernando stood up. He was pale and visibly shaken as he faced Elena's family. He mumbled an apology, soft, strained, and nearly inaudible. "I'm sorry," he said. He never meant for this to happen. However, the courtroom remained silent. For those who had endured the pain of losing Elena, his words could not mend what had been broken. The hurt was too profound, and the apology came far too late. The judge announced the sentence with a serious demeanor, Fernando Munera's sentence to 40 years in prison. Elena's family embraced each other, tears streaming down their faces. It was neither a victory nor a moment of healing, but it represented justice, a small comfort amid their profound loss. Elena's story was just starting to inspire change. Her murder ignited a larger movement for action. Her family, determined that her death would not be the end of her narrative, became advocates against domestic violence. They collaborated with local organizations, initiated awareness campaigns, and organized events to educate others about recognizing the signs of abuse and the risks of overlooking warning signs. The restraining order that Elena had obtained, which was disregarded and broken, became a powerful reminder of how the system had failed her. Activists embraced her story, calling on lawmakers to strengthen protections for victims and ensure that violations have real consequences. Elena's friends frequently reminisced about the woman she was. They cherished her laughter, her determination, and her aspiration to become a physician's assistant. She was kind, ambitious, and vibrant. They ensured that when her name was mentioned, people remembered not just how she died, but who she truly was. Ultimately, Elena Hardy's story transcended being just a headline. It evolved into a movement, a reminder, a warning, and a call to action for those still living in fear. Lindsay Clancy was graduated with a biology degree from Quinnipiac College in 2012. 2 years later, she became a licensed nurse after studying at the Massachusetts General Hospital Institute of Health Professions. Lindsay dedicated her career to helping others as a labor and delivery nurse at Massachusetts General Hospital, where she quickly became known for her exceptional care and was well liked by her colleagues. Her attention to detail and empathy made her a favorite among patients, many of whom specifically requested her for future deliveries. She had a unique talent for calming anxious parents, guiding them through the labor process. In 2016, Lindsay married Patrick Clancy, a software engineer. A year later, they welcomed their daughter, Cora, who dreamed of becoming both a doctor. In 2019, they had their second child, Dawson, a cheerful, charming boy whose laughter and bright smile could light up any room. In 2022, Lindsay gave birth to Callan, a happy, easygoing child. Lindsay, Patrick, and their children lived in a lovely house in Duxbury, Massachusetts, which they bought for $500,000. The home had all the amenities they desired, with a charming backyard featuring a white picket fence and a playground. To their friends and family, Lindsay and Patrick appeared to have a perfect marriage. They rarely argued, their deep affection for each other was clear, as they frequently said love words throughout the day. They seemed to be the perfect example of a happy couple. Patrick was a devoted father to his 3 kids. Their connection was strong, with Patrick often playing with them in the backyard. For Lindsay, there was nothing more important than being a mother. She found raising her children to be the most rewarding aspect of her life. The walls of their home were decorated with photos of her children, and she frequently shared their pictures on social media. Lindsay often posted heartfelt messages, expressing that she felt like the luckiest mama in the world and was so unbelievably thankful for her family life. Those who knew her recognized her commitment to motherhood, noting that she would leave gatherings early to return to her children. She deeply disliked hearing them cry, even during sleep training. After the births of Cora and Dawson, Lindsay found herself overwhelmed by her emotions. The challenges of motherhood felt heavy, and she struggled to manage the complexities it brought. However, she shared on Facebook that her experience with motherhood this time around, with Callan, felt easier. She focused on exercise, nutrition, and rest to improve her emotional well-being. As time passed, Lindsay began to feel anxious about returning to work after her maternity leave. Balancing full-time motherhood with her career started to feel too much for her. In search of support, she turned to various therapies and tried different medications. By September 2022, her anxiety reached its peak, prompting her to seek additional help with an evaluation at the Women and Infant Center for Women's Behavioral Health in Providence. She was not diagnosed with postpartum depression during this visit. On January 1, 2023, Lindsay told her husband that she was having thoughts of hurting herself and their children. Worried for her safety, Lindsay chose to seek help and admitted herself to a hospital for mental health treatment. She spent the next 5 days in McLean Hospital receiving essential care. Upon her discharge, doctors concluded that she was not a danger to herself or others. However, the depth of her struggles remained hidden. Throughout January, Lindsay seemed to improve. Her family enjoyed outings to museums and restaurants. She claimed she no longer had thoughts of self-harm. Even her mother noted a positive shift in her text messages, which sounded more cheerful. Yet, beneath this positive facade, Lindsay was still fighting her internal battles. On January 24, 2023, everything changed for the Clancy family. That day, Lindsay's hidden thoughts and feelings were revealed in a heartbreaking way. It started as a typical day. Lindsay took her children to the doctor for a checkup, as her daughter Cora had a routine appointment with the pediatrician. After returning home, Lindsay spent a lovely afternoon playing in the snow with her kids. She took some photos to capture these moments and shared them with her husband and her mother. Patrick was working from home in the basement. Around 4 p.m., after Lindsay and the children came inside from playing in the snow, Lindsay searched for ways to kill people on her phone and sent Patrick to get takeaway food from a restaurant further away than usual. Lindsay said she suffered a psychotic moment after hallucinating and hearing a voice telling her to kill herself and kill the children. At 5:10 p.m., Lindsay called the restaurant to place their order and mentioned that Patrick would pick it up. Patrick left the house at 5:15 p.m. At 5:34 p.m., Lindsay returned Patrick's call, and their conversation lasted 14 minutes. While everything seemed fine during the call, Patrick felt that Lindsay was busy with something else while they spoke. It was a chilly evening when Patrick arrived home at 6 p.m. after picking up dinner. As he parked in his driveway and entered the house, he was struck by an unsettling silence. The normally lively home felt eerily quiet without the familiar sounds of his wife, Lindsay, and their 3 children. Increasingly anxious, Patrick searched the house for any sign of them. When he found no one, his heart raced with worry. He called Lindsay's cell phone at 6:09 p.m., hoping to hear her voice, but there was no answer. Concerned and anxious, Patrick climbed the stairs to the master bedroom. The silence was overwhelming, with each of his steps echoing in the empty house. When he reached the door, he saw it was locked, which troubled him since Lindsay had never locked herself in before. He turned the doorknob, but it wouldn't open. He tried pulling harder, but the lock was unyielding. Anxious to find his wife, Patrick began to bang on the door, hoping for a reply, but all he heard was silence. Frustrated, he kept struggling with the locked door. He finally managed to force it open, only to be confronted with a horrific scene that would haunt him forever. Blood was splattered on the floor and windowsill, a knife lay on Lindsay's bedside table. The horrifying sight sent chills down Patrick's spine as he realized that something terrible had occurred in that room. Patrick rushed to the bloody windowsill and looked outside, where he saw his wife, Lindsay, lying in the backyard. His heart raced with fear as he quickly called 911 and ran down the stairs to her. When Patrick reached Lindsay, he found her lying on her back, covered in blood, with visible slashes on her neck and wrists. Though she was conscious, she barely responded. Overwhelmed with panic, Patrick struggled to understand what had happened. As Patrick's mind whirled with confusion and worries about their 3 young children, he was forced to ask the unthinkable, where were the kids? Lindsay responded, in the basement. Patrick stayed outside with Lindsay until the police and paramedics arrived, he continually speaking with the dispatcher. The dispatcher could hear the worry in Patrick's voice as he described the serious situation and kept close to his wife. When the paramedics arrived, they quickly assessed Lindsay's condition. They worked hard to stabilize her and provide necessary medical care. Meanwhile, Patrick was deeply concerned about their children. While the paramedics focused on Lindsay, he decided to look for his kids but remained on the phone with the dispatcher. Entering their home, he went down the stairs into the basement, where Lindsay had mentioned the children were. As he descended, he called out, hoping for a response, but there was only silence as he reached the bottom. The atmosphere was tense and the silence was oppressive, creating a growing sense of fear. Suddenly, the dispatcher heard a scream on the line, as if he was in danger. He found his 3 children unconscious on the floor. Overcome with panic, Patrick immediately called for help, pleading with his children to wake up and breathe. He shouted so that the police officers outside could hear. Within minutes, the officers came down and were met with a horrifying scene. 3 innocent children lay unresponsive on the cold floor. Authorities confirmed that they seemed to be strangled. Amidst the chaos, Patrick exclaimed, "She killed the kids," referring to Lindsay. Cora, just 5 years old, and Dawson, only 3, were pronounced dead at the scene. Baby Callan, merely 8 months old, was alive but gravely injured. Despite the efforts of medical professionals, Callan passed away several days later in the hospital, with Patrick holding him in his arms as he took his last breaths. Patrick wrote that his youngest son, Callan, died with great courage despite his young age. Perhaps it was his son's way of demonstrating what he needed to do to move forward. He will always try to be inspired by him. Callan will always be his little hero. In under 20 minutes, a series of tragic events turned Patrick's life upside down, leaving him heartbroken. Meanwhile, Lindsay was taken to the hospital to treat her injuries after jumping out of a window and falling 20 feet in an attempt to end her life. She was hospitalized under police guard, faces 2 counts of murder, 3 counts of strangulation or suffocation, and 3 counts of assault and battery with a dangerous weapon, officials said. Days after the tragedy, Patrick Clancy shared his thoughts. Despite enduring unimaginable sorrow, he spoke with love and forgiveness toward his wife. Patrick said he was not married to a demon, he married a sick person. He also recalled her self-treatment efforts. However, he acknowledged that the ongoing pain from the situation weighed heavily on his family. The GoFundMe campaign aimed at covering the funeral costs for their children received significant public support. Still, some contributors voiced concerns that their donations were indirectly supporting Lindsay's legal defense. This sparked debate and raised alarms about how the funds might be used. Lindsay's lawyers later clarified that her legal fees were not covered by the GoFundMe proceeds. Her parents were responsible for those costs. Despite the controversy surrounding the GoFundMe campaign, it successfully raised over $1 million. At this point, the campaign is no longer accepting donations since it has achieved its goal. On February 7, 2023, a brief hearing took place in Plymouth District Court, where a judge approved Lindsay's attorney's request for the police to set aside security protocols at Brigham and Women's Hospital in Boston, where Lindsay was receiving treatment. This request was necessary for a forensic psychiatrist to evaluate Lindsay for symptoms of postpartum depression. Lindsay's lawyers argued that her self-inflicted injuries severely restricted her movement, which meant that she posed no danger to anyone. They also claimed that she was given an excessive amount of prescription medications. The medications mentioned by her attorney included clonazepam, Valium, Ativan, Zoloft, amitriptyline, meropenem, Prozac, mood stabilizers like lamotrigine and cariprazine, as well as buprenorphine, hydroxyzine, and Ambien. In just 4 months, she had been prescribed a total of 13 different medications to treat mood disorders, anxiety, and psychosis. According to her attorneys, one of the consequences of this overmedication was the development of thoughts about suicide, violence. The attorney believed it was essential to have a detailed evaluation by a forensic psychiatrist to assess the severity of her symptoms and the possible risks linked to her medication. The prosecutor from Plymouth County described her actions as extremely atrocious, cruel, countering the defense's claim that her postpartum mental state and the medication she was taking influenced her decision to commit murder. During the court hearings, Lindsay listened quietly from a hospital room, observing everything through a monitor as the case details were presented. A not guilty plea was submitted for Lindsay. When she took the tragic step of murdering her 3 children, it was classified as filicide, the intentional act of killing one's own children. A psychiatrist who specializes in filicide identifies 5 main reasons why a parent might commit such an act. One surprising reason some parents commit filicide is a misguided sense of altruism. They may believe that by ending their child's life, they are protecting them from suffering or preventing a devastating future. This reason is challenging to understand because it contradicts the natural parental instinct to protect and nurture. Another factor that can lead to filicide is acute psychosis. Parents with mental health disorders, such as schizophrenia or bipolar disorder, might experience delusions or hallucinations that distort their perception of reality. They may mistakenly view their children as threats, believing they are acting to save them from harm. Additionally, some parents may feel regret or disappointment about having children. This negative sentiment can grow into frustration or even hatred, driving the parent to consider drastic actions to eliminate the child. Physical abuse can also contribute to filicide. In situations where children are subjected to severe or ongoing abuse, a toxic environment can form, with the parent becoming the perpetrator. In extreme cases, the parent may experience a sense of relief after harming their child, culminating in the devastating act of filicide. Filicide can occur as a form of revenge between spouses. When one parent feels betrayed, abandoned, or abused by the other, they might misplace their anger onto their child. In such cases, harming or even killing their child may be seen as a way to seek revenge or regain control over their partner, reflecting deep despair and frustration. A devastating incident brought attention to the relationship between postpartum depression, postpartum psychosis, and violent behavior. Lindsay's lawyers claimed that her actions after giving birth were caused by a combination of postpartum psychosis and excessive medication. During the postpartum period, a woman's hormone levels drop rapidly, triggering chemical changes in the brain that can lead to mood swings. While this natural phase can bring about feelings of being overwhelmed, low energy, intrusive thoughts about self-harm or harming the baby, and sleep problems, postpartum psychosis is a much more serious condition that distorts a mother's sense of reality. It affects roughly 1 to 2 out of every 1,000 deliveries and is marked by a sudden and severe loss of mental stability. Symptoms can include delusions, hallucinations, paranoia, extreme mood swings, and confused thinking. During the investigation into the murder of Lindsay Clancy's 3 children, a diary entry from her phone, dated October 25, 2022, was found. This entry, written months before the tragic events, provided troubling insights into her mental state leading up to the incident. In her diary, Lindsay expressed frustration and resentment towards her children, particularly Cora and Dawson. She mentioned feeling resentment because they prevented her from caring for their infant brother, Callan, as she had with her first child. Lindsay noted her discontent when Cora and Dawson returned from preschool, mentioning that their negative moods affected her as well. She described feeling depressed and suggested that her emotional struggles were impacting her children. Moreover, detectives found that just 4 days before the murders, Lindsay searched her phone for "Can you treat a sociopath?" and looked up methods for killing. The revelation that Lindsay harbored resentment towards her children and sought information on how to carry out such a heinous crime was deeply disturbing. During an arraignment in October 2023, the toxicology reports indicated the presence of several medications in Lindsay's system. These reports showed she had been prescribed antidepressants, antipsychotics, sedatives, and an anticonvulsant, all at therapeutic levels. The prosecution aimed to prove that Lindsay had planned the murders in advance and intentionally committed the act of violence. They argued that the medications in her system did not influence her actions, asserting that she had already decided to kill her children. Additionally, the timing and levels of the medication supported their claim that Lindsay acted with clarity and was not impaired by the drugs. In 2024, Patrick Clancy completed the Boston Marathon in honor of his children, raising money for Boston Children's Hospital. Meanwhile, Lindsay, who was on trial for the murder of her children, continued her treatment at Tewksbury Hospital. She is currently reported to be permanently paralyzed. Clancy's trial was originally scheduled for December 1, 2025, but was rescheduled to January 5, 2026, at the request of both parties. Her case has sparked discussions about postpartum mental health and how little is known about it. It was a cold, quiet night, but something frightening was about to unfold in the woods near Altrincham. A car stopped on the deserted road. The driver, a 19-year-old, got out and looked around nervously. In the passenger seat was Alex Rada, only 15 years old and unaware that this night would change his life forever. What began as a secret between them had grown into something dangerous. Trust had been broken, emotions were running high. Soon everything would take a deadly turn. But what really happened that night? The Rhoda family enjoyed a quiet and happy life in a village in Cheshire, northeastern England. Their home was warm and welcoming, shared by Lisa, her husband Adam, and their first child, Adam Jr. For many years, they had hoped to grow their family. Nearly a decade later, their dream was realized in what Lisa called a miraculous event. On March 5, 2004, they welcomed their second son, Alex Rada. As Alex grew up, Lisa noticed he had interests that were different from many other children. He enjoyed playing with her makeup and handbags. When he turned 13, Alex bravely told his parents a personal truth: he was gay. Lisa and Adam had suspected this for a while and welcomed his disclosure with open arms, offering their full support. However, Adam was worried, not about Alex's identity, but about how society might react to him. Unfortunately, his concerns were valid. At school, Alex faced teasing from some classmates, especially from boys who had difficulty accepting those who didn't fit their expectations. Despite this, Alex remained confident. Unlike many of his peers, he never felt the need to hide who he was. At Holmes Chapel Comprehensive School, Alex formed a close group of friends, predominantly girls. They cared for him deeply and supported him completely. These friendships acted as a shield when he faced unkindness, helping him thrive without letting negativity affect him. Full of joy and confidence, Alex was known for his infectious laughter. A bright student, he was also very active on social media, where he enjoyed sharing snippets of his life, his singing, dancing, and laughter. One of his accounts had gained over 4,000 followers. He had a uniquely close relationship with his father, one that resembled friendship. By the time Alex turned 15, he had become quite popular, with his phone frequently buzzing with messages from friends and admirers. However, one message he received one evening particularly caught his attention. It was from Matthew Mason, an older boy known for his mysterious online presence. Something about it made Alex pause. Matthew was a 19-year-old from the neighboring town of Ollerton. He grew up in a wealthy and religious family, living on a large estate valued in the millions. Every Sunday, they attended church together. At school, Matthew was known for being composed. Like Alex, he graduated from Holmes Chapel Secondary and went on to study agricultural engineering. He was a member of the Young Farmers Organization and worked part-time as an apprentice mechanic. In his spare time, he enjoyed fishing with his father, with whom he had a strong bond. At that time, Matthew was also dating a girl named Caitlin Lancashire. In October 2019, Alex shared with Georgia, one of his closest friends, that he had been receiving messages from Matthew. Georgia was surprised because she had known Matthew from school and had never seen him show any interest in men or suggest that he was bisexual. The situation felt strange. Alex and Matthew were from completely different backgrounds. They had never associated with each other socially. Without social media, they might never have met. Georgia warned Alex to be cautious. However, as the messages kept coming, Alex began to feel excited. He added Matthew as a friend on a social media platform, and their conversations quickly became more frequent. For Alex, this felt like the start of something special, his first experience with love. He had never been in a relationship before, and it was exhilarating, as if he was entering a whole new world. Initially, Alex and Matthew's exchanges were light, casual, but over time, they grew flirtatious and more intimate. Matthew complimented Alex's looks. Soon they began sharing photos. One night, after drinking too much at a bar, Matthew made a poor choice. He sent Alex an explicit photo of himself. Alex's friends noted that he often didn't understand the seriousness of situations, seeing them as jokes. Because of this, he viewed Matthew's message as part of a playful flirtation. Things became more serious when Matthew sent a video of a compromising nature. As their online relationship grew, Matthew proposed they meet in person and offered to pick Alex up, but Alex declined, saying his father wouldn't allow it. Despite this, they continued to exchange hundreds of messages. Wanting to know more about Matthew, Alex looked into his social media accounts, only to discover that Matthew was already in a relationship. This revelation filled Alex with frustration and doubt, making him question everything between them. Determined to find out the truth, Alex messaged Matthew's girlfriend, Caitlin, the girl he had seen in several of Matthew's posts. On November 3rd, Alex asked Caitlin if she was dating Matthew. When she confirmed it, Alex revealed that he had been secretly involved with Matthew for the past 2 to 3 weeks. Caitlin was stunned. Alex shared details of their explicit conversations and explained that he only learned about Matthew's relationship after investigating him online. According to media reports, jealousy was a significant factor in Alex's actions. An hour after speaking with Caitlin, Alex confronted Matthew, informing him that he had told Caitlin the truth. Alex's frustration was evident as he accused Matthew of being deceptive, both to Caitlin and to him. He insisted that Matthew needed to be honest because Caitlin deserved it after 2 years together. But Alex had already made the decision to reveal the truth himself. Matthew, who came from a strict religious background, was extremely afraid of his secrets getting out by Alex. In a panic, he denied any accusations to Caitlin and called Alex a liar. This marked a troubling change in the relationship between Alex and Matthew. Feeling trapped, Alex threatened to leak an explicit photo he had of Matthew. Reports indicate that later that same day, Matthew made Alex a beneficiary on his bank account and transferred over £50 to him. By this point, Caitlin had already ended her relationship with Matthew. Despite their issues, on November 9th, Alex and Matthew met in person for the first time and became physically involved. Their secret relationship continued over the next 2 weeks. While everything seemed fine to outsiders, the payments to Alex didn't cease. Matthew was not ready for the truth to surface, but everything came to a head on December 12, 2019. After weeks of threats and pressure, Matthew lost control. On that cold, rainy night, he picked Alex up from his home and drove him to a remote forested area near Altrincham, claiming they were going to have another intimate encounter. However, once they arrived, Matthew violently attacked Alex with a wrench he had brought along. After committing this brutal act, Matthew drove to a friend's farm, hoping to destroy any evidence linking him to the crime. To create an alibi, he then casually went to 2 different bars, meeting friends for drinks as if nothing had happened. At one bar, he took a selfie and shared it on social media, further emphasizing his facade of a typical night out. Later, he even took a picture of himself smiling in bed, with his bare torso showing, which he sent to Caitlin to strengthen his alibi. In the middle of the night, he discovered Alex's phone on the passenger seat of his car. Aware of the damaging information it contained, he quickly disposed of it. As the night went on, Matthew returned to the forest. He attempted to move Alex's lifeless body to the roadside and tried to lift him into his Renault Clio. However, after several unsuccessful attempts, he abandoned the body there and walked away. Alex's parents were becoming more and more worried about his disappearance. After they were unable to contact him, they reported him as missing. Soon, the police, friends, and family were all frantically searching for him. A police officer from Cheshire texted Matthew, asking him to reach out regarding Alex's disappearance. By morning, the stark reality emerged. Garbage collectors stumbled upon Alex's severely disfigured body, found half-naked and bearing multiple wounds. When law enforcement arrived at the forest crime scene, they discovered that Alex had endured at least 15 blows to the head, in what officials labeled a brutal and ruthless attack. A witness had unknowingly implicated him the night before. A photo of a vehicle parked by the roadside was taken, and when the police traced it, they linked it to Matthew. On November 13th, just before noon, officers arrested him on a highway nearby. Despite his efforts to remove the evidence, dried blood was still evident on his car. A search of his car's trunk revealed a garbage bag filled with incriminating items, a blood-stained green sweater, the wrench used in Alex's attack, and a large padded jacket that belonged to Alex. With compelling evidence against him, Matthew was taken into custody and formally charged with the crime. Investigators traced the unfortunate path of Alex and Matthew's relationship, which began with curiosity but ended in horrific violence. Their online interactions often focused on money, culminating in a crucial conversation moments before Alex's violent death. Records indicate that after an initial payment, Matthew had sent Alex a total of £1,270, supposedly for their meetings and to guarantee his silence. The final payment of £100 was sent just 5 days before the murder. As the investigation continued, unsettling new information came to light. Matthew's internet search history revealed his disturbing mindset. He had looked up methods to kill someone. His searches included queries like what happens if you push someone down the stairs, as well as information on poisons and unsolved missing person cases in Cheshire. One of Alex's friends mentioned that when Matthew first contacted Alex to set up their last meeting, Alex was excited. However, after a second phone call, he started to feel uneasy. Alex even texted his friend, questioning whether it was odd that the meeting was in a secret, special location. By that time, Alex sensed that something was wrong. Despite his concerns, he ultimately decided to go, likely because he needed the money. Moments after entering Matthew's car, Alex shared one final image on his social media story. It was a simple photo of the car's interior with a small heart emoji at the bottom. This was the last message Alex ever posted. His closest friends, who often discussed his new relationship with him, grew increasingly concerned over time, particularly because he kept asking for more money. At one point, Matthew told Alex that he was having financial difficulties and could no longer send Alex money. However, shortly after that, he transferred nearly £700 to Alex. Alex's friends, whose names are kept confidential for legal reasons, later informed the police that they were aware of the wrongdoing and had expressed their concerns to Matthew. Despite their advice, Alex decided to continue with his actions. The trial started on January 25, 2021, at Chester Crown Court. The jury learned that the two individuals had only known each other for a few months but had been involved in a secret and illegal relationship during that period. Under English law, A relationship between a 15-year-old and a 19-year-old is considered unlawful because the age of consent is 16. This means that any intimate activity involving someone under 16 is strictly prohibited, regardless of their willingness. During his testimony in court, Matthew acknowledged hitting Alex with a wrench but sought to explain his actions by saying he lost control due to being blackmailed by Alex. He described their initial interactions, which began in October 2019 with casual conversations. Over time, however, Alex reportedly started sending late-night messages that included personal and suggestive inquiries, such as whether Matthew was clothed. He also claimed that Alex had attempted to attack him prior to his death. Matthew mentioned that he was struggling financially and had lost friends, family as a result of the situation. Although he did not clearly specify what the payments were for, he insisted that he was under immense pressure. Furthermore, he expressed feelings of shame and discomfort after becoming intimate with Alex. At one point, Matthew recognized that his actions were wrong, not only because Alex was male but also due to his age. During the trial, prosecutors shared all the details of Alex's conversations with Caitlin, who was Matthew's girlfriend at the time. One of the detectives strongly disagreed with Matthew's assertion that the murder was spontaneous. The detective argued instead that Matthew had carefully planned the attack and had tricked Alex into going to a secluded place, thinking that no one would discover his intentions. During the victim impact statements, Alex's parents, Adam and Lisa, honored their son with heartfelt words, describing him as a beautiful and loving child. Through tears, Lisa shared that losing a child in such a horrific way felt like living in hell. She highlighted that Alex was raised in a loving environment, not a fearful one, and he was always proud of himself, never needing to hide or pretend. Lisa condemned Matthew's actions, noting that despite his early admission of guilt, Matthew put their family through additional trauma in a selfish effort to lessen his sentence. She expressed that he didn't consider the immense pain he caused both families. Lisa described Matthew as the most selfish and calculating person she had ever met, criticizing his attempts to blame Alex and tarnish his reputation. During the trial, Adam reflected on his son as a cheerful and respectful young man who always considered other people's feelings. He acknowledged that he could never fully recover from the loss and that their lives would be forever changed. After a month-long trial and over 9 hours of jury deliberation, the jury rejected Matthew's account of the events and found him guilty by a majority vote of 10-2. As he sat in the defendant's chair, crying, the judge announced his sentence. Because he used a weapon during the crime, the mandatory minimum sentence was set at 25 years. The judge characterized the murder as premeditated, indicating it was carefully planned and executed with no remorse. He noted that although Alex may have initiated contact, Matthew not only responded but also actively encouraged an intimate relationship. The judge emphasized that Matthew was significantly more experienced than Alex, who was still young and emotionally immature. Additionally, he stated that Matthew had intentionally created the situation. While this was not Matthew's first intimate experience, it was Alex's first. The judge concluded that Alex's naive demands were influenced by the intimate offenses committed by Matthew, so the responsibility for what happened did not lie with Alex. In deciding Matthew's sentence, the judge emphasized his total lack of empathy, his complete disregard for the victim and the victim's grieving family. As a result, in January 2021, he was sentenced to life in prison, with a minimum of 28 years before being eligible for parole. However, on June 2021, Matthew's legal team filed an appeal against this sentence. After considering both written and oral arguments, a panel of 3 appellate judges concluded that the original sentence was too long and reduced the minimum term from 28 years to 26 years. Matthew faced a deep internal conflict as he struggled to accept his own gender and feared rejection. This unresolved conflict caused him unimaginable pain and destruction. In his desperate attempt to avoid confronting his reality, he not only compromised his own future but also hurt someone who accepted him without shame or fear. Love can indeed be blind, but sometimes it borders on insanity. In some instances, it is so blind that it prevents one from recognizing the cruelty directed at loved ones. This can lead to truly horrific outcomes. Maya Chappell was born in March 2020. Her mother was Dana Carr, and her father was James Chappell. Dana herself came from a dysfunctional family, where both of her parents struggled with alcohol abuse. Her father was cruel, often beat both his wife and daughter. All of this left a serious mark on Dana's soul. She ran away from her family as soon as she could provide for herself. This decision likely came just in time. Dana's father was convicted of murder. He ended up in prison, while his 17-year-old daughter was in a relationship with James Chappell, who was already 21. Many believe that Dana was too immature for a serious relationship, marriage, and especially motherhood, but she desperately needed love. Additionally, having a boyfriend was an opportunity for her to escape her dangerous family. They got married and were preparing for the birth of their child. Unfortunately, the relationship with James did not allow the young mother to attain what she wanted. Soon after Maya was born, Dana broke up with James in early summer 2022 because she had begun dating Michael Damon. Their relationship developed rapidly, and by the end of August 2022, they had moved in together. Despite James's efforts to distance himself from Dana, Maya stayed with her mother. The new boyfriend was unemployed, and Dana worked almost 7 days a week to support the entire family. Money was tight, so they saved on everything, including childcare and kindergarten. When Dana went to work, she left her daughter with her boyfriend. The girl's father rarely saw his daughter due to the restrictions imposed by Dana. All of this occurred in the small town of Shotton Colliery, UK. Everything seemed to be proceeding normally, and nothing foreshadowed trouble until one day. On September 28, 2022, around 10 a.m., Michael's stepfather stopped by their house. By this time, Dana and Michael had been living together for a month. According to Dana, everything was fine. However, when he arrived, Maya was acting very restlessly, as if she were afraid of Michael. When asked about his suspicious behavior, Michael explained that he had had a dispute over the phone with several banks that were supposed to give him a loan but refused. Things were not going well for him. He tried to solve his financial problems, managed to convince his stepfather that everything was fine and that there was no need to worry. After his stepfather left, Michael began trying to apply for benefits, contacted several more banks and organizations to secure a loan. However, they also denied him due to his lack of employment and income. Later, Michael called Dana, claimed that her daughter had lost consciousness and was having difficulty breathing. Following this call, Michael contacted the UK emergency services to 999. When paramedics and police arrived at the house, they found Maya in critical condition. She was taken to the Great North Children's Hospital, where she remained unconscious as doctors desperately fought to save her life for the next 2 days. Unfortunately, Maya died in the hospital. An autopsy was performed, revealing multiple injuries to Maya's brain, including severe trauma consistent with violent shaking. Medical experts determined that Michael Damon had likely shaken Maya forcefully, contributing to the fatal brain injuries. 5 witnesses stated that these injuries could have resulted from child abuse. The doctors who treated Maya were shocked by the extent of her injuries. She had extensive bruising all over her body, but it was impossible to determine the exact sequence of events leading to her condition. Even in her intimate areas, a large bruise and marks in various stages of healing were found, although there were no signs of sexual assault. Based on the condition of the bruises, it appeared that most of the injuries had been inflicted on September 28. Dana and Michael were questioned separately. Both denied any abuse towards Maya, offered several explanations. They stated that Maya was very energetic, frequently running and falling, which they said was why she had so many bruises. However, doctors disagreed with their claims, stating that it was impossible for the child to have gotten into such a condition on her own. Detectives began investigating the circumstances related to Maya's death. Family members of Michael and Dana reported that Maya had started developing bruises shortly after they began living together. The first bruises were discovered on August 26. On that day, neighbors saw Maya while walking with their children, and it was apparent that she had marks on her head, which she was trying to hide with her hair. The following day, they met with relatives, including Michael's family, who also noticed that Maya was hurt. Dana and Michael explained that Maya had fallen from a slide, and Dana supported this explanation. Although they managed to calm everyone down, it was difficult to believe their story, especially since the bruise was not only on Maya's head but also inside her left ear. It's hard to imagine how such an injury could occur accidentally. Additionally, there were small bruises around her jaw that looked like they were caused by fingers. On September 5th, Michael called his girlfriend at work to inform her that Maya was having trouble breathing. When Dana requested time off to come home, everything appeared to be fine, but new marks had appeared on Maya's body. Michael quickly brushed them off as injuries from accidental falls in the yard where they had been playing while their mother worked. The next day, when Dana took Maya out again, several acquaintances pointed out a noticeable cut on her nose. A few days later, Maya had a split lip. Each time, the explanations were similar: she was running, fell, and got hurt. Maya was briefly entrusted to Dana's mother so her grandmother could spend time with her. That evening, while bathing Maya, her grandmother noticed bruises all over her body. She took a photo of the bruises and sent it to Dana, who then advised her to take Maya to the hospital. Following this advice, she went to the hospital. When the doctor inquired about the bruises, she shared the usual explanation that Maya was clumsy and very active, often bumping into things both indoors and outdoors. The doctor accepted her explanation, and no one reported the situation to the authorities. On September 14th, Maya visited a kindergarten near their home for the first time. The purpose of this visit was to help her adjust to the new environment. Maya enjoyed her time there, but unfortunately, she never returned. Dana, her caregiver, encountered questions from the staff about the marks on Maya's body, which led her to stop bringing Maya to the kindergarten. The teachers even tried to convince Dana to let Maya return, but she declined, saying that Maya either didn't want to go or was unwell. On September 15th, Maya was scheduled to be given to her biological father, James. However, Dana refused to comply, claiming that Maya was sick. Instead, she left the girl with her mother and stepfather. Dana's mother took Maya to a relative who was a trained nurse. That day, they noticed a large, unusual bruise on Maya's buttocks. It had been concealed by her diaper, but once it was removed, the bruise was clearly visible. They asked Dana for an explanation, and she pointed to Michael, who claimed that Maya had bitten herself. This explanation seemed unlikely, so they decided to take some photos to document the odd injury. During a phone conversation with Dana, Michael repeatedly insisted that he was not at fault, even though no one had accused him of anything. Their behavior raised further suspicion. The following weekend, Maya visited her relatives and was observed with new injuries, including 4 bruises on her chest. What stood out most was the calm attitude of her mother, who insisted that the injuries were merely accidents. On September 27th, Maya had gotten another bruise while they were playing outside. Despite these concerning incidents, Dana remained unbothered and continued to go to work each day, leaving Maya alone with Michael. It later emerged that Dana had repeatedly lied to Maya's father, stepfather, mother, kindergarten teachers Maya's health. This deception was aimed at hiding the true person responsible for the bruises, whom detectives believed was Michael. After Maya died, Dana was the first to be questioned and consistently provided false information. To justify her lies, she created a story claiming she was pregnant during Maya's abuse and suffered a miscarriage due to stress when Maya died, which she described as emotional shock. This made it difficult to extract useful information from her. Meanwhile, Michael exhibited immature behavior. He initially blamed Dana's mother for abuse, then his stepfather, and ultimately Maya's biological father. However, detectives were convinced that the ongoing abuse of Maya was linked to him, as her bruises appeared specifically when she was left alone with Michael. The reason for the abuse was quickly understood: Michael was venting his frustration on Maya. This frustration stemmed from his financial troubles and the threats he faced for failing to pay his debts. On September 28th, Michael had a particularly difficult day when banned substance dealers confronted him, claiming he owed them a large sum of money. These issues had been mounting for several months, they had been persistently pressing him for repayment. Although he was being followed, he had not yet suffered any physical harm. He managed to assure they once again that he would pay them soon. However, he actually did not have the necessary funds and was desperately trying to find a solution. Michael reached out to social services for assistance, but received no help. He then tried contacting banks, but to no avail. This continuous stream of bad news drove him to a breaking point, and he directed his anger towards the little girl. The incident deeply affected Maya's biological father, James. For the past 2 years, he believed he was trying to protect his daughter from her mother, Dana, whom he saw as unfit to care for his daughter. When Dana filed for divorce, she accused James of being aggressive and cruel, claiming their relationship was toxic. James was concerned that Dana might seek revenge, which could harm Maya. Although Dana could not prove her claims about her ex-husband's aggressive behavior, she was awarded primary custody of their daughter. James was only allowed to visit his daughter on weekends. Initially, Dana tried to restrict communication between James and their child, despite his legal visitation rights. She often found ways to prevent their interactions, avoid bringing their daughter to him. Consequently, James had very limited time with Maya. When he noticed bruises on Maya, he asked Dana about them, but she repeatedly made excuses about accidents. Eventually, she began to limit his visits with Maya even more to evade his questions. James believed that if Dana was not directly involved in the abuse of Maya, she at least supported her boyfriend, who probably was involved. From the start, James suspected something was off about Michael, but Dana presented Maya's relationship with Michael as nearly perfect. She claimed that Michael treated Maya like his own daughter, that they spent all their free time together, going for walks, watching movies, and playing games. When James first noticed bruises on Maya, he immediately checked Michael's name in police databases, suspecting he might have a criminal history. To his surprise, Michael had no record. Despite Dana's reassurances, James witnessed changes in Maya's behavior during their brief visits. She had become disobedient, extremely anxious, cried often, and struggled to sleep. He associated these changes with the negative influence of Dana and Michael, but he lacked concrete evidence. One day, when James went to pick up his daughter from the home she shared with Dana and Michael, he found broken windows. Both claimed that some troublemakers were responsible for the situation, but it soon became clear that the damage was caused by dealers trying to intimidate Michael. On James's next visit, he saw that the house had been vandalized with paint. When James suspected his daughter was being abused, he wanted to collect evidence to formally report the situation. Unfortunately, during this time, Dana severely restricted his communication with Maya. She frequently canceled planned visits, claiming to be sick or saying Maya didn't want to see her father. This left James powerless to protect Maya. It soon became clear that these actions were intentional, aimed at allowing Maya's bruises to heal and preventing any inquiries about them. When Maya finally got to visit her father, Dana continued to make excuses for the new injuries, stating that Maya had been with her grandparents for several days, thus shifting the blame onto them for not watching the girl properly. Unfortunately, James faced challenges when trying to communicate with Maya because of her young age. He wanted to talk about her bruises, but every time he brought it up, she seemed to gesture as if something were breaking and simply said, "D." It wasn't until later that James understood she was referring to Michael by a nickname derived from his last name, Damon. Unfortunately, this information came too late to charge him with abusing the little girl. During the investigation, a lot of relevant information emerged from examining Michael's emails and phone records. It became clear that Dana was unaware of the serious situation and believed Michael's false narratives. He often claimed that Maya had fallen while playing on the playground or bumped into something at home. However, such incidents had never occurred in Maya's life before meeting him. These sudden changes in her behavior didn't raise any alarms for her biological mother, who continued to trust what she was told. The detectives questioned why Dana, considering the strange injuries and her boyfriend's suspicious behavior, had not reached out to a medical center, the police, or other professionals. Dana explained that her lack of action was due to her inexperience. When family members began to ask uncomfortable questions about Maya's injuries, Michael responded by saying that if they didn't stop prying into their affairs, he would no longer babysit Maya. Meanwhile, Dana tried to reassure her boyfriend, claiming that she believed him and rationalizing his actions to protect their relationship. Rather than confronting her doubts about Michael, she continued to defend him. The conversation concluded with Dana expressing her love for him, stating that she trusted him and wanted him to keep babysitting her daughter. Despite being shown pictures of her injured daughter, Dana claimed that without her boyfriend's supervision, Maya would have suffered even more. James was taken aback by his ex-wife's apparent ignorance, but he felt powerless to change the situation. Throughout their relationship, Michael repeatedly assured Dana that he would never harm her daughter, and she never think ill of him. On the day of the incident, when Michael messaged Dana that Maya was choking, Dana concluded their brief exchange by expressing her love for him and her desire not to lose him, showing little concern for her daughter's well-being. When the child was discovered alive at home, there were immediate and serious suspicions of domestic violence. At the medical center, doctors found numerous bruises on Maya's body in various stages of healing, including what looked suspiciously like bite marks. The autopsy revealed that the child had endured repeated beatings with a blunt object, likely inflicted by an adult's fists. Most of the injuries were concentrated around her head and abdomen, suggesting she may have been violently thrown to the floor. The surgeon who attempted to save Maya noted that her injuries resembled those from a fall from a significant height or a high-speed car crash. Only after hearing these alarming assessments did Dana begin to have suspicions. However, detectives believed Dana was feigning ignorance, as Maya's injuries were the result of consistent abuse from Michael, a situation she likely was aware of. Others around her had been discussing the matter and urging her to recognize the reality of the situation. Michael was interrogated but did not confess to any wrongdoing. After Maya died at the medical center, Michael Damon was charged with murder. During a second interrogation, where he was the main suspect, he continued to deny any guilt. He portrayed his relationship with Maya as loving and claimed he never yelled or swore at her. Michael said he noticed Maya was unwell on the day she stopped breathing. They had been playing Xbox together, and then she went to her bedroom while he continued to play. About 10 minutes later, he heard a loud thud from her room. Upon entering, he found Maya lying motionless on the floor. It looked like she had fallen out of bed twice. He immediately noticed Maya's irregular breathing and called Dana at home, then contacted emergency services. This explanation seemed unconvincing. The detectives interviewed a young man who had visited their home earlier that morning. He was disturbed by Maya's behavior and initially wanted to take her with him. He described her as crying, calling for her mother, looking frightened, and even trying to hide when she saw Michael, indicating she felt uncomfortable around him. When Michael spoke to the young man about the situation, Michael assured him that everything was fine and that there was nothing to worry about. Nevertheless, the young man managed to record a video that showed Maya's unusual behavior, which was later presented in court to contradict Michael's statements. The detectives uncovered numerous calls related to Michael's financial issues and were alarmed by their timing. Michael had temporarily left Maya alone to request loan on his mobile phone, showing a complete disregard for her well-being. Investigators also discovered that Michael was unfaithful to his girlfriend, Dana, as he had a profile on an online dating site and date other women while in a relationship with her. Additionally, Michael was taking steroids along with other prohibited substances, which likely exacerbated his aggressive behavior and emotional instability, leading him to lose control at times. This situation caused trouble for Maya. Dana was ultimately arrested, charged with cruelty toward her daughter for her indifference to the domestic abuse, and chose to stand by Michael instead of leaving him. In October 2023, the trial began. During the trial, Dana expressed that she had been so infatuated with her boyfriend that it blinded her to the reality of the situation. She failed to recognize the harm Michael was causing her daughter and did not believe her loved ones when they tried to warn her. Dana said she didn't fully grasp the consequences of Michael's actions. Many suspected that she was merely trying to avoid prison. During the hearing, the defense attorney attempted to present Dana as a victim of long-term familial abuse, particularly from her father. He highlighted that she had experienced violence throughout her childhood. Ultimately, the attorney's arguments might have evoked some sympathy from the jury, but they did not excuse her lack of concern for Maya. During the trial, Dana expressed discomfort at being in the same room with Michael. She contradicted her previous statements with another falsehood. Initially, she claimed to have suffered a miscarriage after Maya's death. Now, she escalated her claims, stating that she had been pregnant with twins fathered by Michael and that their fate also ended tragically. Dana asserted that she had an abortion upon realizing Michael had killed her daughter and wanted nothing to do with him or his children. This claim was swiftly debunked by prosecutors, who noted the absence of any medical documentation to support her allegations of pregnancy, miscarriage, or abortion. End of trial. Maya's mother, Dana Carr, 24, was convicted of leaving the child to die and sentenced to 9 years in prison. Subsequently, Michael Damon's trial began. Unlike Dana, he chose not to testify in his defense. His lawyer argued that Michael lacked sadistic intent, premeditation, or planning regarding Maya's death, claiming it was an accident. Despite these weak justifications, Michael was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison. However, the court allowed for the possibility of parole after 20 years. Maya's funeral was held on November 4, 2022. Following this heartbreaking event, James posted a final message for his daughter on social media. In it, he said goodbye, expressed his sorrow for not being able to protect her, and promised that they would be reunited one day. Heloisa Maria de Alencastro Souza was born in 2008 in Cuiabá, Central West Brazil. She lived peacefully with her mother, Suelen de Alencastro, and her grandmother. The family led a simple life, blending in with their community. Heloisa attended Adventist College in Centro Politico Administration, where she was a dedicated student. She was quiet in class, always completing her assignments and staying out of trouble. Heloisa didn't have many close friendships, but she did have one trusted friend with whom she shared personal thoughts. This friend later suggested that Heloisa displayed some traits of level 1 autism, although she was never officially diagnosed. Signs included her reserved nature, avoidance of eye contact, and anxiety in social situations. Despite this, Heloisa was warm and friendly with those she trusted. She had a deep passion for animals, aspired to become a veterinarian. She took her dreams seriously, researching veterinary programs from a young age. Her grandmother noted that she was responsible, helpful around the house, capable of cooking, cleaning, and caring for the family pet without needing constant supervision. She was an ordinary teenager focused on her future and goals, living a life that was steady, unassuming. Benedito Anunciaco de Santana was born in 1984 into a modest family and was the younger of 2 brothers. His older brother later became involved in a legal case related to a violent crime against his former partner. Their father was a laborer, while their mother stayed at home. The family lived in a suburb of Cuiabá. Neighbors noted that both boys were quiet from an early age and did not have a close relationship with their parents. As a teenager, Benedito began attending a local Catholic church and eventually started helping out during services. After finishing school, Benedito obtained an entry-level job at a local government agency. Through personal connections and a reputation for hard work, he gradually advanced in his career. At the time of these events, Benedito was the head of the Transportation Division at the Secretariat of Science, Technology, and Innovation in Mato Grosso. He earned a stable income, had access to a work vehicle, and was regarded as someone with a respectable social standing. In his daily life, Benedito often attended local events, expressed concerns about neighborhood problems, and suggested new initiatives. He stayed active in his church. On social media, he consistently shared religious posts, inspirational quotes, photos from events, and images of places of worship. Many of his pictures featured his son, Gustavo Benedito Jr. Lara de Santana, or were taken at churches and community celebrations. His online presence reflected the image of a stable, respectable man with strong faith. Not much is known about Benedito's personal life before he met Suelen. At the start of their relationship, He was not married and was not living with his son's mother. There are no official records of his past relationships. His behavior suggests that he deliberately kept details of his personal history private, only sharing information that supported his public persona. Sue Ellen was employed at a government agency in Cuiabá, where she met Benedito. At first, he appeared confident, friendly. In the workplace, he was known as a dependable and dedicated employee. He was always polite, calm, and eager to assist his colleagues. This positive impression significantly influenced Sue Ellen's choice to let him become part of her life. Their relationship reportedly started about 4 months before the incidents in question. The investigators found evidence that Benedito had full access to her home, often used her keys. This indicates that their relationship might have been more serious, long-lasting than it seemed at first. Benedito quickly became a regular part of Sue Ellen's home life. He started visiting unexpectedly, moved around the house confidently, and appeared to integrate himself into their daily routines. To outsiders, it seemed he genuinely cared and was making an effort to be involved with the family. He was calm, rarely raised his voice, and had a knack for making others feel comfortable. Benedito was older, had a stable job, projected an image of responsibility, maturity. Sue Ellen did not seem to notice anything alarming. She saw him as a source of support. Inside the house, the atmosphere was tense. Heloisa's grandmother, who lived with them, felt uneasy about Benedito's frequent visits. It wasn't that she disliked him, rather, she found his overly polite and gentle demeanor insincere. Heloisa herself felt uncomfortable during their first interactions. Although she didn't confront him or create conflict, she made a point to avoid engaging with him. She confided in a close friend, expressing that Benedito made her uneasy, even though she couldn't pinpoint exactly why. She was troubled by his gaze, his speech, and particularly the way he posed in photos. What concerned her the most were his social media posts, where he used hand gestures that reminded her of criminal symbols. She told her friend frankly that he appeared to have a shady background. Despite this, she chose not to share her concerns with her mother, possibly fearing she would be misunderstood. Heloisa's friend noted that Sue Ellen seemed either unaware of Heloisa's change in behavior or didn't consider it important. No one in the household questioned Benedito's past, his acquaintances, or his previous relationships. His behavior never raised any alarms. A seemingly decent person had gained Sue Ellen's trust without arousing suspicion. On Tuesday, April 22, 2025, at around 3 p.m., it was a typical weekday in Cuiabá. Sue Ellen and her mother were at work, leaving Heloisa home alone. She wasn't expecting any visitors, everything seemed calm. At that time, Benedito arrived at Sue Ellen's house in a government-issued Fiat Toro, which he used for his job at the Secretariat of Science and Technology. He had 3 teenagers with him, his son Gustavo and 2 others, aged 16 and 17. They had been instructed earlier and stayed hidden in the vehicle to avoid attracting attention from neighbors or security cameras. Their plan was to wait until there were no adults in the house. Benedito parked the car in the garage and entered the house alone. Surveillance footage showed that he was inside for about 15 minutes. He then returned to the car and left. The cameras did not capture anything unusual. He seemed calm. Neighbors did not report hearing any noise or seeing any signs of trouble. However, during that brief time, Benedito had let the 3 teenagers into the house. One of the confessions revealed that the group waited until Benedito left the property before executing their plan. Heloisa was inside the house alone when she saw strangers and became terrified. In her panic, she tried to escape to another room, but one of the intruders caught her. She was in shock, unable to scream or fight back. They tied her legs. Tragically, her life was taken in a room using a USB cable. At the time of the crime, Benedito was not in the house. He had reportedly left to take a work-related call. However, testimonies indicated he was aware of what was happening. Heloisa lost consciousness on the floor due to difficulty breathing. One of the attackers checked for her pulse and breathing but reported she was unresponsive. They then used ropes and bed sheets to move her body, wrapping it up, dragging it into another room to hide it temporarily. They ransacked the house to make it look like a burglary. Their next plan was to attack on Sue Ellen. By 6 p.m., Sue Ellen came home with a female relative who was holding an infant. Security cameras captured their arrival. Everything seemed normal outside, but inside, the assailants were preparing to strike. Although the lights were off, the air conditioning was running, raising Sue Ellen's suspicions. She called out for Heloisa but received no answer. As they entered the house, the three teenagers attacked Sue Ellen, overpowering her, hitting her, tying her up, and dragging her further inside. The woman with the infant was not harmed. She was instructed to sit quietly against the wall with the baby, not to interfere, while the attackers showed no aggression towards them. Sue Ellen was initially confused about the situation. She had been tied up, physically harmed, and locked away in one of the rooms. She thought a robbery was happening, suspected that her daughter might be tied up somewhere else in the house. The intruders did not provide any explanations, nor did they show their faces or give their names. However, at one point, Sue Ellen recognized one of the voices as belonging to Gustavo, Benedito's son. This realization made her understand that the attack was not random. While keeping Sue Ellen isolated, the intruders began to steal valuables from the house. They quickly loaded a TV, electronics, important documents, and the sheet covering Heloisa's body into Hyundai HB20. They used Sue Ellen's own car to transport the stolen items. Once they finished loading everything, the group left the house. Neither neighbors nor passers-by noticed anything out of the ordinary. Sue Ellen remained inside, still tied up and injured, unaware of the full extent of what had occurred. She believed that Heloisa had been taken away from her. No one had informed her of the truth. The crime was disguised as a robbery with an abduction. The scene was chaotic. Cabinets were forced open, the lights were off, and there was a mess everywhere. It resembled a typical break-in, but it had actually been meticulously planned. The perpetrators wanted it to look like a regular home invasion. Sue Ellen had no idea that the worst had already happened. Soon after the others left, Benedito returned to the house. He didn't go in immediately. Instead, he waited outside until he was certain everything was finished. Once inside, he found Sue Ellen bound and visibly shaken. She told him that a group of young men had broken in, attacked her, stolen items, and taken Heloisa with them. Benedito's reaction was exaggerated. He pretended to be surprised, anxious. He was merely acting as if it were the first time he heard the news. Benedito was the one who suggested taking Sue Ellen to the nearest urgent care clinic. He posted on social media with a photo of Heloisa, making an emotional appeal for assistance, stating that she was missing and he needed everyone's support. His actions were carefully planned to portray him as a distressed, worried stepfather seeking help. When they arrived at the hospital, Sue Ellen was brought in a wheelchair. Surveillance footage showed Benedito assisting her into the building, talking to medical staff, and staying close to her. He appeared to want to be seen, made no effort to avoid the cameras. Authorities quickly launched an investigation after receiving a report of an assault and possible abduction. While Sue Ellen was receiving medical treatment, police took her statement, began collecting evidence. The first action was to track her vehicle, a Hyundai HB20 registered to Sue Ellen. Surveillance systems monitored the car's route, capturing it traveling along Dubai Avenue and then toward the area between Ribeiro du Lipa and the highway leading to Guarujá. In that area, investigators found a white bundle made of bed sheets and evidence indicating the vehicle had stopped there. They also discovered an old concrete well in Ribeiro du Lipa, which is where the body had been hidden. The fire department was called to safely recover the remains. Forensic experts found that the lower legs had been bound, and there were marks around the neck suggesting restricted breathing. There were no clear signs of a physical struggle. A broken leg occurred, possibly from falling down the well. At this point, investigators started to focus on individuals close to the family. While reviewing surveillance footage, they noted Benedito's unusual behavior and his attempts to portray himself as a victim. Meanwhile, investigators began gathering information about Benedito's son, Gustavo. The first arrest happened quickly. A 17-year-old involved in the crime was found hiding in an apartment in a housing complex. He surrendered immediately, did not resist. During questioning, he provided a detailed account of the events, naming all those involved, including Gustavo, the second teenager, and Benedito, who he identified as the mastermind behind the plan. The teen explained how the group operated, where they hid, how tasks were divided, who created the plan, and how the crime was executed. With this information, investigators located Gustavo at his grandmother's house. Law enforcement arrested him without incident. Gustavo confirmed the details provided by the first teen, did not deny his involvement, and shared that his father had instructed him to gather people, outline the plan, actively involved him in the attack. His statement clarified that Benedito had initiated the entire scheme, that Gustavo participated in hopes of gaining his father's approval. The next arrest was of a 16-year-old who was found hiding in a messy lot in Tropicalville. He admitted to being involved in the crime but shared limited details. However, by the time he was arrested, the investigation already had a clear understanding of the situation. The recovered items matched the locations identified by various suspects, but the most important evidence came from their consistent testimonies. These statements outlined how the crime was planned, who was responsible for each part, their actions at different stages, and the order in which they occurred. Technical evidence had already linked Benedito to the central role in the crime, now it was reinforced by the direct confessions. Once all the individuals involved in the case were in custody, Benedito was brought in for questioning. Initially, he denied any involvement, claiming he was unaware of the crime, he equally shocked by what had occurred. His statements contradicted the confessions of the others. The investigators decided to set up a confrontation. The first meeting was between Benedito and a 17-year-old. When asked to speak, the teenager did not hesitate. He clearly stated that Benedito had given the instructions, taken them to the house, and left them to execute the plan. He identified Benedito as the mastermind, explained how he received specific directives. In his defense, Benedito labeled the teenager a liar, emotionally unstable. Benedito asserted that he would never allow harm to come to Eloisa and claimed he hardly knew the teenagers his son associated with. Things changed when Gustavo entered the room. He clearly stated that he had followed his father's commands. Investigators observed that this was when Benedito's story started to shift. He became vague, deflected blame, and avoided giving specifics. Later, Benedito provided a different account, saying that Sue Ellen had allegedly informed him that her daughter was exploring non-traditional personal identities and had supposedly asked him to remove any influence. He interpreted this as a prompt to take action. However, there was no evidence to support his claim. Eloisa's close friend told investigators that Eloisa had never shown romantic interest in anyone, shied away from personal topics, and had not pursued any relationships. Her family confirmed that she lived in a private world, showing no interest in intimacy or social connections. Benedito's attempt to blame Sue Ellen was viewed as a clear strategy to evade responsibility. Investigators found no evidence that Sue Ellen had any involvement in planning the crime. Benedito crafted a narrative to present himself as a victim, claiming he had misunderstood someone's words and hadn't given clear instructions. During psychological evaluations, investigators observed manipulative tendencies in his behavior. Benedito consistently influenced others while staying in the background, creating no direct links to his actions and controlling events from afar. Testimony from the teenagers made it clear that he was the key figure behind the actions, carefully avoiding direct involvement. He assigned roles, provided instructions, timed events, and maintained an external alibi. Additionally, it was revealed that in 2020, Benedito's biological brother was convicted of a violent crime against his ex-spouse. This attack occurred in broad daylight and resulted in fatal injuries. At the time, Benedito's brother was already subject to restraining orders but disregarded them. Although this was legally separate from Benedito's case, investigators noted a troubling history of aggressive behavior within the De Santana family. As the investigation progressed, Benedito's true nature came to light, revealing him as a manipulative and calculating individual. He not only got teenagers involved in a serious crime but also exploited his own son, believing Gustavo would stay silent. His behavior was cold and calculated, showing no remorse. Attempts to present an alternative story quickly fell apart. The testimonies of his accomplices, along with solid evidence, painted a clear picture against him. When confronted with undeniable facts during questioning, Benedito began to confess. He told investigators that just before the crime, he saw messages between Sue Ellen and her ex-partner, which he interpreted as a betrayal. He felt used and rejected, leading to a breaking point for him. He admitted that Heloisa annoyed him and recognized that she didn't accept him, always regarding him with suspicion. However, he denied harboring any personal hatred towards her, insisting he only wanted to restore balance in his relationship with her mother. This confession confirmed that the crime was premeditated rather than impulsive. It was not motivated by greed or fear of being caught. Instead, it stemmed from a personal desire for revenge, aiming to emotionally break someone and establish control, all while maintaining the facade of a respectable individual. The interrogation revealed that the physical aggression towards Sue Ellen was also planned, intended to incapacitate her, undermine her will, and create a false narrative of a robbery. Benedito aimed to manipulate Sue Ellen's condition and emotional shock to present himself as a concerned bystander and divert suspicion from himself. After the initial investigation, prosecutors confirmed that the case would be treated as a premeditated crime with aggravating factors. The presence of minors, the use of deceit, pre-planning, a government vehicle, and the false staging of an abduction all bolstered the prosecution's argument. Benedito Anunciaco de Santana was identified as the main suspect. He was arrested, suspended from his public position, and subsequently fired. By the time the investigation began, all suspects were in custody. The teenagers were moved to appropriate facilities, while Gustavo, who had just turned 18, was waiting for legal proceedings to take place in adult criminal court. The public's response was immediate and strong. The crime against the young girl, involving her stepfather, caused widespread outrage. Local media extensively covered the case. Central to the public's concern was the issue of trust. How could someone who seemed decent be capable of planning such a crime against his partner's daughter? Sue Ellen learned about her daughter's death while being treated by medical staff. After the assault, she had been taken to the nearest urgent care facility for help. At first, Sue Ellen thought her daughter had been kidnapped and held on to hope that she would be found alive. However, as the investigation continued and the body was discovered in a well, the police revealed the tragic truth. Sue Ellen reacted with intense grief and despair. Witnesses reported that Sue Ellen went into a state of hysteria, requiring sedation. Hospital staff recalled her screaming that she didn't feel alive, that everything was over, and that she somehow felt responsible. Later, while giving her testimony, Sue Ellen admitted she blamed herself for what happened. She realized she failed to recognize the true character of the man she had welcomed into her life. Benedito had seemed trustworthy, kind, and attentive. Only Eloisa had been wary of him from the start, but Sue Ellen dismissed her concerns as typical teenage defiance. Sue Ellen survived, but she was deeply affected by her experience, resulting in a loss that could never be reversed. The case is being investigated as murder, armed robbery, and child abuse. Heloisa's memory lived on, touching the lives of people beyond just her family. The school she attended released an official statement offering condolences and remembering her aspiration to become a veterinarian. Her relatives urged the public to be more careful about whom they invite into their homes, particularly regarding the safety of their loved ones. Although this family's story ended in tragedy, it served as a strong reminder that danger can often appear in the guise of kindness, and that the justice system's role extends beyond punishment to include prevention. Surveillance technology, law enforcement, and the analysis of digital evidence were essential in solving the case. However, the most crucial factor was our focus on the small details, those initial signs that indicated something was wrong. It was early morning in Chapel Hill when two friends returned to their apartment, assuming Faith Hedgepeth was just sleeping in. Her car was parked outside, and the door was unlocked, making everything seem normal. However, as they entered her room, they were shocked by what they found. A blanket covered something on the floor. There was blood on the walls. The room was eerily quiet, but it was evident that something horrific had occurred. There were no signs of forced entry, security cameras had not captured anyone coming or going, only a few strange late-night texts and some unusual behavior. It was a crime scene that would be etched in their memories forever. What really happened in that apartment? Why did it take so long to catch her killer? Faith Hedgepeth was born on September 26, 1992, in Warren County, North Carolina. She was a proud member of the Haliwa-Saponi Native American tribe. After her parents divorced when she was an infant, her mother, Connie Hedgepeth, and her older sister, Rolanda, played significant roles in her upbringing. Despite the separation, Faith maintained a strong relationship with her father, Roland, who described her as the light that helped him overcome his struggles with addiction. Her birth gave him renewed purpose. Faith was gifted and ambitious, excelling in her studies. She received the prestigious Gates Millennium Scholarship and enrolled at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, where she initially pursued a degree in biology. Although she faced challenges transitioning to university life, Faith remained determined. She switched her major, worked 2 jobs, and stayed focused on her goal to be the first in her family to graduate from college. She aspired to become either a pediatrician or a teacher, reflecting her compassionate nature. Faith shared an off-campus apartment in Chapel Hill with her friend and former freshman roommate, Karina Rosario. They lived in an apartment at Hawthorne at the View, a complex just minutes from campus. At one point, Karina's boyfriend, Eric Takoi Jones, also stayed with them, but his presence created tension. Their relationship became toxic, characterized by conflict and breakups. Even after Karina changed the locks, Eric tried to break into the apartment twice. With Faith's support, Karina secured a protective order against him. Despite this, Eric moved into another unit in the same complex, remaining disturbingly close. On September 6, 2012, Faith attended her classes and then participated in an event hosted by Alpha Pi Omega, the oldest Native American sorority in the country, which she hoped to join. At 7:15 p.m., she left the event to work on a history paper about her tribe. At 8 p.m., she and Karina went to the campus library. From 8:30 to 9, she exchanged text messages with her father about her hopes of joining a sorority. Faith briefly left and returned at 11:30 p.m., they headed back to their apartment around midnight. Shortly after, they decided to go to the Thrill, a nightclub that allows entry for people under 21. Security footage showed them entering the Thrill at 12:40 a.m. They danced for over an hour before Karina began to feel unwell from drinking. They were recorded leaving at 2:06 a.m., with Faith driving them home. Upon returning to their apartment, Karina reportedly got sick and went to bed. Around 3 a.m., a neighbor heard loud noises from above, which sounded like heavy thuds, similar to furniture being knocked over or a heavy backpack falling. Faith's Facebook account showed activity at around 3:30 a.m. Just 10 minutes later, a text message from Faith's phone was sent to Brandon Edwards, one of Karina's ex-boyfriends. The message said, "Hey B, can you come over here, please? Rosario needs you more. You know, please let her know you care." Brandon replied the next afternoon at 4:16 a.m., asking who had messaged him, but by then, it was too late for a response. No reply ever came. While these messages were sent, Karina's phone also displayed outgoing calls to Brandon. At 3:52 a.m. Karina called Jordan McCrary, a UNC-CH soccer player she knew. At 4:25 a.m., Karina left the apartment and got into McCrary's car. She left the apartment door unlocked because she thought Faith was asleep. The following morning, around 10:30 a.m., Karina tried to contact Faith for a ride back but received no response. So, she reached out to their mutual friend Marisol Rangel, who came to pick her up. They arrived at the apartment just before 11 a.m. and assumed Faith had just slept in. Once inside, they called her name but got no reply. What they discovered in the bedroom was shocking. Faith's body was found partially undressed and covered with a blanket, positioned against the bed. Her shirt had been pulled up over her head, and there were signs of a brutal attack, with blood splattered on the walls, floor, and furniture. A used tampon was also found near her body. There were no signs of forced entry, and unfortunately, no security cameras recorded any activity in or out of the apartment that night. Karina was the one who called 911. When the authorities arrived at the apartment, Faith's death was confirmed at the scene. The crime was extremely brutal. Faith had been violently attacked. In the following days and months after the murder of 19-year-old Faith Hedgepeth, investigators uncovered unsettling details that painted a chilling picture but still raised many questions. One key finding was the presence of semen on Faith's body. DNA testing showed that it matched genetic material found in the bedroom. Although physical evidence suggested a possible abuse assault, the autopsy revealed no significant trauma to the genital area. Nevertheless, the Chapel Hill police leaned toward the belief that Faith had likely been abused, a conclusion supported by her family. An autopsy determined that Hedgepeth died from blunt force trauma to the head, likely caused by being struck by an empty rum bottle in the apartment. The Bacardi rum bottle found at the crime scene became crucial evidence. It contained tissue fragments and DNA, leading investigators to suspect it might have been the murder weapon. Next to Faith's body was a fast food bag from Time Out with a handwritten message, "I'm not stupid," and "jealous." Interestingly, despite the room being covered in blood, the note remained clean. This implies that the killer either wrote it after the attack, taking the time to clean themselves, or placed it there carefully to hide their identity. Handwriting expert Peggy Walla analyzed the note and determined that it was written in a disguised manner, suggesting that the author intentionally altered their handwriting to avoid recognition. Faith's murder deeply affected the Chapel Hill community, where homicides are rare, averaging less than one per year. Police Chief Chris Blue stated that the investigation quickly became one of the largest homicide cases in North Carolina's history. However, updates were scarce for many months, making the search for answers painfully slow for Faith's family. Her mother, Connie, shared that they were not allowed to see Faith's body. Additionally, all information about her death was kept confidential by a court order, which was unusual for the Chapel Hill police. In December 2012, the FBI became involved in the investigation and created a psychological profile of the suspect. They believed that Faith's killer likely knew her and might have lived nearby. It was suspected that the individual took a special interest in the case, possibly discussing it often or showing unusual behavior afterward. By July 2014, after obtaining a court order, the Chapel Hill police released 300 pages of case documents. The autopsy report, which came out in September, confirmed what the family had suspected: Faith died from multiple blows to the head. Her body had numerous cuts and bruises, and blood was found under her fingernails, indicating she had fought for her life. Court documents revealed that during the initial investigation, only 2 apartments were searched, Faith's and one other in the same complex. Some sources claimed that the wooded area behind the apartment was never investigated. Additionally, reports suggested that no search dogs were used, and officers did not canvass the neighborhood to question other residents, which was surprising given the high-profile nature of the case. Faith's phone revealed a possible clue in her case. On the night she died, she called her friend, Marisol Rangel, 3 times, with one of the calls resulting in a voicemail that accidentally recorded while the phone was in her pocket. The message is hard to decipher, but those close to Faith believe it captured a moment of tension. Some think they can hear arguing or a struggle, while others perceive it as background noise from a nightclub. Faith's father, Roland, claims he can detect his daughter's distress in the recording. Journalist Tom Gasparoli became very interested in the case, starting a blog and podcast to help uncover the truth. He collaborated with forensic audio expert Arlo West, who analyzed the voicemail thoroughly. West, experienced in audio enhancement and forensic analysis, found that the recording contained 4 voices, 2 male and 2 female, suggested that the conversation was heated. The voicemail was time-stamped at 1:23 a.m., just before Faith was seen leaving the club with her roommate. At 2:07 a.m. on September 7, 2012, surveillance cameras recorded Faith Hedgepeth and her roommate leaving the Thrill nightclub. Everything appeared normal at that time. However, as the events of that night were examined, investigators and independent experts started to doubt the accuracy of the digital evidence. Arlo West raised concerns about the timestamp of a voicemail left from Faith's phone at 1:23 a.m., which seemed inconsistent with the nightclub footage. West noted that both Faith and her friend Marisol Rangel had phones that often had timestamp issues. He also pointed out that the local cell towers were unreliable, suggesting the message might have been recorded at a different time. Although the Chapel Hill police agreed to review the enhanced audio version, they maintained confidence in the original metadata, stating they did not believe the recording captured the moment of the murder. Much of the attention also focused on Karina's ex-boyfriend, Barrick, who was known to dislike Faith's influence on Karina and reportedly blamed her for their breakup. Police discovered concerning messages that Eric sent in the hours leading up to the murder. On September 6th, he texted a friend asking for forgiveness for something he was about to do. He also posted a similar message on Twitter. 3 days after Faith was killed, he shared a cryptic post on Facebook, stating, "Dear Lord, forgive me for all my sins and the ones I may commit today. Protect me from the girls who don't deserve me and those who wish me dead today." Investigators seized Eric's vehicle and searched his home, but they found no valuable evidence. His DNA did not match the sample found at the crime scene. Despite his cooperation, the police still considered him a person of interest, suspecting that he might know who was responsible, even if he was not directly involved. In 2015, police in Chapel Hill were hopeful that DNA evidence would eventually lead to an arrest in the case. Although they did not disclose the specific DNA details or its collection location, they maintained a positive outlook. At the same time, Faith's death caused significant fear and sorrow on campus. Memorial vigils were organized, including a traditional Native American ceremony to celebrate her life and spirit. Many students grieved for her, viewing her not just as a friend but as a cultural sister whose joy and compassion had positively impacted many. In 2016, a significant breakthrough renewed interest in the case. A laboratory in Virginia analyzed DNA from the crime scene and created a composite sketch of a potential suspect. This image was developed using forensic phenotyping, which can predict characteristics such as eye color, skin tone, face shape, and likely ancestry. The results suggested that the suspect might be of Native American descent with either European or Latino ancestry. While the sketch was not a definitive identification, it offered investigators and the public a possible face associated with the crime. Several people associated with Faith were investigated in connection with the ongoing case. One of them was a man who left the nightclub with Faith and Karina. He had arrived at the club earlier with 3 companions. All 4 were questioned and provided DNA samples, but none matched the DNA from the crime scene. Faith's father has been very vocal, insisting that Karina knows more than she has shared. Other people have also raised concerns about Karina's actions after Faith's body was found, regarding the 911 call she made. The call lasted over 8 minutes but did not mention Faith by name and omitted the fact that another friend was present in the apartment, giving the impression that Karina was alone. Police have indicated that Karina's account raises several questions, and there are inconsistencies in what she told investigators. One neighbor who saw Karina shortly after the body was discovered remarked that neither girl seemed upset. Complicating matters, Karina had reportedly left the nightclub early because she felt unwell but then left her apartment again just hours later, leaving the front door unlocked. A university soccer player picked her up, and his roommate noticed a small red mark on Karina's clothing that day. Police were alerted and searched for the shirt, but the test results were inconclusive. Authorities could not determine if the stain was blood, nor could they connect Karina directly to the crime. Despite the absence of physical evidence linking her to the murder, Karina has remained a key figure in the investigation. A private investigator, who is closely working with Faith's family, believes that the truth may involve Karina. He speculates that a possible argument between Faith and Karina at the Thrill nightclub, possibly related to a relationship, could have triggered Faith's death. Shortly after the murder, Karina moved out of North Carolina and has not publicly addressed the case. According to Faith's father, Roland, she also stopped returning his calls. Nevertheless, the police state that Karina has always been cooperative when they contacted her. For almost 10 years, the murder of Faith Hedgepeth remained clouded by theories, suspicions, and unanswered questions. Friends, former partners, and acquaintances were all investigated, and despite numerous leads, no arrests were made until 2021. On September 16, 2021, the Chapel Hill Police Department announced they had arrested 28-year-old Miguel Salguero Olivares from Durham, North Carolina. This breakthrough didn't come from tips or interviews, but from DNA collected after Miguel was arrested for a DUI in Wake County the previous month. His DNA profile was entered into the system and matched DNA found at the crime scene nearly 9 years earlier. Additionally, court documents revealed that a palm print found on the suspected murder weapon, a liquor bottle, also matched Miguel, strengthening the case against him. Prior to this discovery, the police had not identified him as a suspect, and his name had not appeared in earlier reports. Police Chief Chris Blue urged the community to be patient, saying, "This story will take time to completely unfold." In November 2024, the case took a significant turn. Prosecutors updated the original charges, adding 3 new ones: first-degree burglary, first-degree abuse, and first-degree abuse offense. These new charges intensified the seriousness of the allegations and clarified what may have happened in Faith's apartment that night. The arrest brought a mix of relief and renewed anguish. After years of uncertainty, a suspect had finally been named, someone now officially accused of causing Faith's death. However, as the legal proceedings began, it started a new phase in the quest for answers. Who was Miguel Salguero Olivares? How did he meet Faith? What exactly occurred in her final moments? For her family, this was a long-awaited step toward justice. Yet, for a community still grieving, it was just the beginning of discovering the complete truth.